Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Reconnected. We're live for the first time with the other half of Chasing Labels. Thank you for coming on, Mr. Andrew Cabral.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, this has been a long time in the works. I know you've had my co-host and partner in film, I guess we could say, Stephen Billings on a couple of different of your programs, of your shows. So I guess it was about time I came on here myself. And I keep in mind, I had to book back in May, I think, just to get on now. So it's a month long process. It's like trying to get into a very prestige restaurant. This is the Dossier of podcast shows, I guess, if I can make an American Psycho reference.
No
But yeah, good
joke,
to be here.
I am booked almost all the way through October already.
Jeez, that's a flex and a half.
It's tough because I go through these stretches where I can't book anybody just because I've been so busy, and then I'll do like 9 in a row, and suddenly I'm good for 2 months. So it helps to do it a lot.
Right, right. It's time. Yeah, you got to get them while you can, because you never know when you hit that dry spell of stuff, or
Exactly.
whatever the case may be.
Well, as usual, everybody that watches this, you should be listening to Chasing Labels. If you haven't, the link for all of their stuff is in the description below. I'm sure you've heard of them or seen them or whatever. They've got the YouTube channel going on. They've got the podcast. They do a lot of the same stuff as me with the interviews, with the going over the important announcements. You guys do great stuff. Thanks for continuing to do that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the support. For anyone listening, if you want to support us, check out the links and all that kind of stuff. It is similar to Disconnected. If you're not familiar, we just seem to be very focused on boutique labels that you know and love, and we talk about them in the movies and all that kind of stuff.
Speaking of that, we already have a couple people from a couple labels watching tonight. Deaf Crocodile's here, and that's Craig Rogers, who does a lot of the restoration. And he already said, if anybody has any questions for Deaf Crocodile, go ahead and ask in the comments, and I can shout him out. And he is restoring as we speak, and he will happily answer some questions. And for Deaf Crocodile, super shout out right now. They closed up their Kickstarter this week, or not closed up, but they met their goal. They've got, I believe, 4 days left. So if you were kind of hanging out on the sidelines to make sure they'd reach their goal, they did. Now you're safe. You can go donate and get them even higher and further along, as you're going to find out tonight. Physical media is a very volatile thing, and we should be willing to support where we are wanting to support. And Deaf Crocodile does some incredible work and will always have my support.
Nice.
Yeah, let's see who else we got tonight. We'll say hi to some few people here. We got Planet Mondo. He's going to get another shout out tonight, so we'll talk about him in a bit. Stan Geezy is here as usual. Josephine DeMarco is here. Happy birthday tomorrow.
Nice.
She's a big Chasing Labels fan.
Happy birthday. Well, pre-birthday, I guess.
Yeah. Let's see. Brian Lapitan is here. I hope I say that right. That's how I've always said it, and I hope that's correct. Paul, what's going on, my friend? Daniel Sibner doesn't want us to talk much about that Amazon Exorcist set, but we're going to have to, my friend. Sulako, Zpam, Terry. Josephine has a question. Can you think of any good book authors turned directors or screenwriters?
Stephen King has tried it with Maximum Overdrive, and then I think some other things. Who seems to be doing a lot of work? Stephen Chbosky, who directed Perks of Being a Wallflower. He wrote the book and directed the movie, and he's done some other work as well.
I don't think I've realized that.
Yeah, That surprised me. I think he was announced recently to be working on some type of project and whatnot. But yeah, that comes to mind immediately, because that's a different medium. I know we're going to get into actors and actresses a little later on, turning their careers into directing, but going from one medium to another is got to be interesting, because sometimes books don't directly translate directly to screen. Sometimes they do it well, sometimes they don't. It really all depends on the case by case basis.
That's very true. And just you speaking that, it brought to mind one of my favorites, actually, Michael Crichton. He directed a few things and actually had a huge hand in ER when that was on the screen.
He did. I remember Michael Crichton. He did a lot of work in the 70s and early 80s, because a lot of his stuff is now coming to Blu-ray, coincidentally. I mean, Westworld has been out for years. And of course, he directed that originally, and then of course that got turned into that HBO series and whatnot. But yeah, he directed a lot of that kind of sci-fi paranoia stuff from the 70s.
I
That
think it
kind
did
of
one that
thing.
Spring Factory is about to release. I think it's Coma.
Yes, Coma. That's the one I was thinking of. Coma, which is another kind of like big government, big corporation conspiracy
Yeah.
theory movie, which I guess was on just all the rage back in the 70s.
Oh yeah,
Because there's just a lot of political things going on as they are now. I mean, it's a never ending cycle. They've
for
been having
sure.
political things in our culture since the dawn of the country, pretty much, and before so.
Yeah.
But yeah, Michael Crichton is another one.
Media Membrane, what's going on, my friend? Jake, hello. Andrew, have you read any books written by actors that you like?
Oh, I have to look. Um, Books written by actors. I've read um like biographies and such. I still need to get into a lot of biographies, a lot of memoirs and things like that. I have a whole. If you think my to watch list is long, my to read list is even longer. I've been pulling off stuff from my shelves in the last couple of years that I bought back in high school in like the mid 2000s, just because it like back then I would just comb bookshelves and just buy stuff,
Right.
and I would like leave them on the shelf for years, and then I completely forget about them. I'd have to think. Yeah, I'd have to come back to that now that I think about it.
Tony, who is from the Imprint cast, is watching live tonight. What's going on, Tony? Dustin says, good evening to my physical media faves together. Hello. Let's see. Nicomedes, good evening, gents. Looking forward to some great movie talk. It's going to be fun. Sardis says, welcome, Andrew. David Lash, Silent Mandible. Not Stephen King, though, says Dan Geezy. Maximum Overdrive is problematic, to say the least. It's not amazing.
It's a bit of a cult movie, I would say. I think if you listen to Stephen King talk about it, I'm pretty sure he was dealing with a lot of substance abuse at the time during the 80s, as many people were, and I think that it definitely affected the production of that film. Especially if you go back and watch like old interviews that he was doing for like marketing or promoting the movie at the time, it may be readily apparent.
They were basically Coke advertisements, and not the normal ones.
Right, which is such an age drug to me. I don't know why
Yeah.
I just correlated that with the 80s. I don't know why.
It definitely leaned that way, that's for sure. Flip is here tonight. What's going on? Flip says chasing labels kicks major butt. Tony's shouting out to John, and he were guests of Chasing Labels, and did great.
They were early guests. No, actually, no, they were recent guests.
Yeah.
I remember because we went on their show when we were just starting out, and we finally had them on our show recently. It's amazing how quick time flies when you're
Yeah.
doing this stuff.
Especially during COVID time.
Yeah, it's still adjusting to that. I don't know if the world will ever be fully adjusted back. At least my world won't.
It's a good point. What's going on, Cam? Carrie Mulligan finally watched Justice Ninja Style from VHS Hitfest. It's like watching a film that was written and directed by Napoleon Dynamite. That's a really great way to say that. Let's see. Paul just watched the VSA release of The Grave. Says it's pretty fun. Stan is going to watch Trash Humpers. They're playing it at the New Bev this weekend.
Nice.
That's the New Bev for you. Love that. What's going on, Griff? Trying to take my mind off of having my car die. Jesus, Paul, I'm sorry. Let's see. Jason is here. He's talking about William Peter Blatty. John Peters is here. What's going on? I get an A+. I pronounced your last name right. That's great. Man. Reggie shouting out Perks of a Wallflower, says it's a great film. I don't think I've ever seen it. Once you brought it up, I was trying to think if I could picture it even.
Yeah, it was a movie that I mean, I'm a sucker for kind of the teenage coming of age films, and it was very much in that vein. It has a modern day star-studded cast. Logan Lerman, Emma Watson was in it. Ezra Miller years ago. Dylan
Emma
McDermott,
Watson.
Paul Rudd plays a teacher in the film. I really like that film a lot. It was a film that I think was kind of an indie darling at the time. And I remember it being based on the book, and I was really surprised. Like I said, the author directed the film, which always leads me to think that there's got to be a conflict of interest when you have the author doing the film version, because he won't want to take anything out because it's so precious to him. So he'll probably just be beholden to it.
I was just thinking about that, the awkwardness of the studio stepping forward with notes. How do you respond in anybody that's in that situation?
Yeah, like I think of that also when the authors are the screenwriters as well. Like how much how much do they leave out? How much do they leave in? Do they have to change things because of the different mediums? All that kind of stuff. I think of like Cormac McCarthy as well. I think that that was because he wrote The Counselor, which was the
Yeah,
Ridley Scott film, and that was I think based on his work. I could be completely wrong on that, but I remember that film not being well received at the
it
time
sounds
it came
right.
out.
We got some more Crichton shout outs directed to the Andromeda strain. Let's see. Sardis and Craig from Deaf Crocodile said they both saw Coma in the theaters. That's awesome. Jason wanted to shout out that he and John Peters, who's in the chat, used to write for Killer Film, a website that is defunct, unfortunately. Joe Jack is here. What's going on? Justin Beam watching from Facebook. What recent releases have been the biggest surprises for us? Films you never thought would get the upgrade treatment. You got any answers for that one?
Oh, what just was announced earlier this week is the Criterion of Freaks, Todd Browning's Freaks. I like I said, mentioned it on our show. I shed a few tears when that happened, just because it's a movie that's been, uh, it was controversial when it came out. It's incredibly contemporary. It's been
Right.
stuck on an old Warner Brothers DVD for probably nearly 20 years. I never thought it would get a Blu-ray treatment at all. And not only that, it came with 2 more Todd Browning films, so it's like a Todd Browning love fest from Criterion, which was
Yeah,
awesome to see.
that was a big deal. Searching for Bobby Fischer that got announced by Imprint was a nice surprise for me. That was one that seemed to be languishing there for a long time. Gosh, some of these some of these smaller labels that are diving into some of the more obscure things, like what Air 444 is doing with Fatal Termination. That's a big deal. I'm always surprised and ecstatic to see Mondo Macabro releases, which, by the way, pre-orders went live for their next wave today, and those will be shipping in about a month, and even less time than that if they get them in. So if you are looking for that, those are open on their site now. And they got a bundle price for the 2. So if you get both of them, you save a little bit of money. Paul Huggins wants to read the Ernest Borgnine autobiography. I've heard that thing is amazing.
I bet it is. He was such an interesting actor and character person. I don't know if you've ever seen interviews with him. Very, very interesting. I love the movie Marty. Marty is probably one of my favorite
It's a
movies.
big deal.
It's a beautiful movie. That was a nice re-release that I think Kino did recently.
Yeah.
Speaking, just going back to Justin Beam's question,
and it went under the radar. Like hardly anybody made a big stink about it. That's a big movie.
I think maybe because similar to me, we just didn't think we would get another release because Kino had released it years ago, and there was an aspect ratio issue with it, and Kino just never really fixed it. So they just put it out as is. So I'm like, this is all we're gonna get. Might as well buy it because I love this movie so much. And then they're like, no, we're gonna re-release it with both aspect ratios. I think both the 1:33:1 and then the wider screen one. And it would have been nice if it was a 4K or some type of deep remastering, but I'm just glad that movie has enough love for it to get more than one Blu-ray release in the last several years.
Well, and on top of that, Kino is doing that for some other titles. We're actually talking about another one of those tonight. So I'm glad that they keep doing that. I do wish that they were able to get some more, like we got different cuts on the one we're going to talk about tonight that they couldn't get. And that's, we're getting superior releases in other territories for those films that they're upgrading sometimes, which it does hurt a little bit.
Yeah, I'm reaching the point where my mind is starting to get like all rattled with trying to compare the releases from different companies in different places, and different like year releases because because of the special features are all so different now, and that's really becoming more and more apparent as time goes on. I think the special features packaging is becoming the big difference, and sometimes the format can become the big difference. I mean, I think UHD. Releases were really starting to come out in the UK well before a lot of the companies here started picking up on them. And now it's flowing like water. It's flowing. It's like every week it's a big surprise about what's getting released on UHD these days.
That's
Pleasant
very, very
surprises
true.
though.
Terry shouting out Norman Mailer is another author turned director. Rainbow Library, what's going on? Anthony's here. Jeremy's here. Key-Ray is here all the way from Australia. Paul is talking about musicians turned screenwriters. There's quite a few of those too. Let's see. B. Miller turning in for the first time live. Welcome. Hello. Who else we got? We got a few more. Jeremy Long might be going to the New Bev to see Trash Humpers as well. Oh, I love that. Let's see. About an hour into Giallo in Venice. What a sleaze fest. Yeah, that one is that one gets a little sleazy.
Oh yeah, the backstory about the making of that movie is ridiculous. Didn't they go through like 6 or 7 directors trying to get that movie made just
If
because
I
it was
remember
so
right, yeah.
hard working with Klaus Kinski, so difficult. He's probably one of the more difficult actors for you to ever work with.
You've got stories like that on pretty much every set, except for with Jess Franco. They seem to get along fairly swimmingly. I mean, they butted heads a little bit, but nothing like these others. Let's see. David Cronenberg says Stan did it in reverse. He released his novel Consumed late in his career. Let's see. Stan brings up that Borgnine was married to Ethel Merman. Yikes. All right. Rainbow Library is saying that your voice is super smoothing, Andrew.
Thank you. I've always been incredibly self-conscious about it. When we first started doing YouTube or podcasting stuff, that's kind of probably why Steven does all the editing with that, just because I probably couldn't listen to my voice for much a long time and stuff like that. But thank you very much for the compliment. I'll take all compliments. They don't go unappreciated here.
All right. I think we've caught up with pretty much everybody. So now to check in really with you. So first off, Chasing Labels. What's been going on lately? What do you want to shout out and bring people's attention to?
Oh, I mean, we've been doing our thing now for what did we just did our 100th episode special back in May. We're now like 108 episodes into the podcast. This year was heavily focused on interviews and stuff like that, getting guests back, getting new guests in, all that kind of stuff. And I think we've taken a little bit of a summer break when it comes to those things. I think mostly to do to the fact that we were doing so many a week that becomes overwhelming. It really does. Having to schedule timings, having to make the time, having to do this. Of course, Steven has a full-time job. He has a wife and a child. He's got a life to live. I'm the opposite of the spectrum. We're always got that yin yang going on, where I've got lesser responsibilities in life. Movies are really my life in all aspects. But it's still getting us together to have to do those things is very time consuming. It can become very tiring. So we've pulled back a little bit of that recently. We still have 1 or 2 interviews, I think, ready to go and pre done and whatnot. But yeah, we just keep doing the show every week. The announcements never stop. They never stop, as many of you know. So yeah, it's been really a great, fascinating year. Met a lot of really awesome people. It was really nice to see when we did our 100th episode. All of the faces coming back, you know what I mean? All the people who really make the time and the effort to not only remember you, but to want to talk to you, to want to come on the show. And we've been very fortunate to interview very many people, and not had any issues with anyone. You know what I mean? Just been really, really nice.
I was going to try to slander somebody, but I couldn't think of anybody that has been on the show and just make a totally off the wall joke like Gage from last week that was on my show. When he went on yours, I heard he called you a bunch of bad names, but Gage is like this most.
Gage is a very loyal listener, and he's always engaging our posts on Facebook, which is nice.
He's so clean cut and perfect. I can't say anything bad about him.
He's my favorite person in Jacksonville, Florida. I think he's the only person I know, but he's my favorite.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, famously, you kind of watch pretty much everything. Like when the announcements come out and you're going to be talking about it that weekend, you watch a lot. So any recent watches you want to highlight?
I do watch a lot. I mean, I watched stuff in preparation for this show. I mean, I've got the time, and that was the kind of the thing I wanted to do. I wanted to contribute at least something for the show. You know what I mean? I'm going to watch movies anyway, regardless of whether I was doing a podcast or not. So I was just like, I might as well complete 2 things off of the checklist: watch new movies and also to make progress and work for the show. Yeah, of course, I'm always watching stuff. I mean, last week we covered a bunch of the new releases, but I watched tons of. I did actually end up watching Fatal Termination. You brought that up. I did watch Fatal Termination. I watched The TerrorVision titles are always completely new, undiscovered things for me. I don't know where these films come from, but I watched like American Nightmare, Rat Man, stuff like that. I did get to watch. Also, like my passion in life is like classic films. So every time like Warner Archive announces some stuff, it's either stuff I've seen or it's stuff I've been wanting to watch. So it's like it finally gets me to that point where I've
Yeah,
got to watch it. So of course I watched Little Women with Katharine Hepburn, who was one of my all-time favorites. The Life of Emile Zola is another film that was a Best Picture winner in
yeah,
1937. And I have this thing in my collection where I'm trying to collect all the Best Picture winners and have them all like lined up in a row on a shelf, just to see
nice.
kind of like the passage of time going from like Wings all the way up to today. So that's one I'm definitely going to have to get at some point. I did see Father's Little Dividend, which I mentioned to Stephen how what a not great title. You know what I mean? It's an every time you have to put an economic term in a title of a movie, it may throw people a little off. But it's actually the sequel to Father of the Bride, starring Spencer Tracy and Elizabeth Taylor, and you would not have known that by the title. And of course, and I also remarked that growing up, I watched the Steve Martin versions from the '90s, which I think were more appropriately titled "Father of the Bride Part One" and "Father of the Bride Part Two," which
Yeah.
makes it much easier when it comes to connecting these movies. So I watched those last week. This week I actually finally got to watch a documentary I've been wanting to watch for a long time, and that is Dogtown and Z Boys from 2001, 2002. And I watched that in tandem with the movie that we're probably going to end up talking about is Lords of Dogtown as well.
What'd you
I feel
think?
I feel like you have to watch those two back to back. I feel like
Yep.
they go there. One is Lords of Dogtown is literally a movie version of that documentary. It really is. So the documentary fills in all of the gaps that the movie doesn't touch, but the movie kind of dramatizes and gives you a sense of the humanity of those individuals and living during that time, which is the 1970s, which is a far removed time from not only when we grew up, but from when people are growing up now. And you don't realize that everything seems to have an origin story, and a lot of the origin stories don't go as far back as you think. Our modern day sense of skateboarding and stuff like that really started in the 70s
Yep.
and then expanded, of course, in the 90s. And then, we into modern day with like the X Games and things like that. And a lot of it's now become like Olympic sports and whatnot. It's really interesting. It's also interesting to go back and watch a movie from 2005 and being like, I guess, feels like a mid 2000s drama,
Yeah.
directed by Catherine Hardwicke, which we'll get into. And it was, felt like an indie film with Heath Ledger when he was just starting out before he blew up, really blew up.
Yeah.
Um,
He didn't have
I-
that star power, but that movie is powerful.
yeah, he is. Yeah, you talk about kind of coming of age teenage stories like I have an affinity for. Um, that film definitely touches on those things. It also touches on like stardom at a young age, which is something that still happens today, whether it's in the entertainment industry, whether it's professional athletes, stuff like that. Giving someone uh, that stardom at that age, what does it do to them? How do they take it? How do they
Right.
interpret it? Unfortunately, it has a lot of adverse and negative effects on people, and we keep seeing that over and over again throughout the generations. And no one ever fixes those problems. The generational problems still persist when it comes to those things. And it was an interesting kind of focus on that, a really powerful focus on that. But yeah, I'm glad it's getting. It had a Blu-ray release in 2018, and it's
Yeah.
getting a re-release now. So that movie does have staying power. Its 20th anniversary is 2 years away.
Yeah.
It would be nice if they had waited a little bit, but I understand why. Money.
Yeah. Let's see. Recent watches for me. I'm going to do a full review for the channel on this one, but just in case you were sort of hesitant, I really wanted to shout out Strigala. Did you watch this one yet?
I did not get to see Strigala, but I remember when TerrorVision announced it. How is it?
It is it's a wild movie, first of all. It's always heralded as a Friday the 13th knockoff, but the funny thing is it's just under 90 minutes, and the Friday the 13th knockoff part doesn't start until an hour into the movie. So when everybody says it's a Friday the 13th knockoff, you don't get to hear about all the amazing stuff that happens before that. And it's pretty damn unique. And it's not often that we get an Indonesian horror ripoff of a slasher film from the US. So it is certainly worth the time. From what Brad has said elsewhere, it was expensive to license. To get that from Indonesia and get it all properly legally done, it was an undertaking. And this is the kind of movie that, like, you can tell they're rescuing something. It's a brand new thing for most people that have never seen this. It looks remarkable. The restoration is like shockingly good. So
Yeah.
if you were on the fence, this movie is pretty damn fun.
Yeah, when it comes to things like TerrorVision or other labels in similar vein, they are literally rescuing films from the depths, of being lost, and not only being lost, but just being just sitting in poor quality for decades. As someone who has to watch who watches them before they get onto the Blu-ray, I can tell you it's got to be like night and day. It has to be just a revelation in many cases. Yes, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is great. And the one thing I'm going to allude to now, that just in case you haven't seen it before, this thing, it has, it's a low budget Indonesian film, and there is a boat chase in this movie. And it's not just like a little sissy boat chase. It is a real, like, really well shot boat chase. It is fantastic. So I'll leave that. Any recent pickups you want to highlight?
Yeah. I mean, I've got a bunch of stuff here on my couch that I'm gonna slowly grab. So I recently got a bunch of Imprint titles. Coincidentally, we'll be talking about Imprint tonight. So I got The Great Gatsby, which was actually an adaptation I had never seen before.
Yeah.
The Long Voyage Home, John Ford and John Wayne team up. No big surprise there. Melina, directed by Giuseppe Tornatore, who directed Cinema Paradiso. So if that doesn't sell you, I don't know what else will.
Well, and the other thing, somebody that's been on both of our shows, the director Sean Baker was posting on Instagram just yesterday that he watched that release specifically and calls it one of the best films of the 2000s.
I don't necessarily disagree with him because it's really fantastic. I remember seeing this on DVD in like used DVD shops for years and not knowing what it is because they would just use this same image of just Monica Bellucci on the front to sell the movie, and it was always an eye-catching cover for the obvious reasons, but the movie itself is phenomenal, just absolutely phenomenal. But some other stuff I got here is My Summer of Love, which is I think this is the Paul Polakowski film. I first saw Paul Polakowski's work when he did the movie Ida, I never knew how to pronounce it, for many years ago. And I think it ended up winning the Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film. And I thought it was like a modern day Bergman film, a modern day Polish Bergman film. And I thought it was absolutely amazing. And he went on to do the film that got released by the Criterion Collection. I'd have to look it up. I have it and I can't remember what it is. I know people are probably yelling at me right now. But Louis Malle's Damage is another one. And then the big one here is The Bounty with Mel Gibson and Anthony Hopkins from the 80s. A story that keeps getting adapted many, many times over and over again. But based on a true story, if anyone interested. But yeah, this is in their typical thick top loading spot.
Those.
Yeah. That's probably my more recent stuff.
Sibner was asking Skyline, and then Video Store Review says Cold War. I think you're probably thinking of Cold War.
Yeah, Cold War. Thank you. This is what happens when you have an audience, because I'm not used to having an audience, so I try to ask Steven, and if he doesn't know, I'm like, scramble, and then I go and check.
Well, my two big things that I'm going to shout out are two Altman flicks that I don't know if I've seen either one of these, but I just got in from Radiance, OC and Stigs and Thieves Like Us. And because it was part of the Radiance subscription, it came with these postcards. So there is, Sibner was talking about Stan. Got it. Yeah, so they've got, there's probably a good 10 postcards in here that came just as a bonus with these. Radiance, though, they've just been pumping out ridiculously great items. I'm still, like, I know Fran has this huge history with Arrow Video and Arrow Academy specifically, but the amount of stuff that Fran has been able to accomplish in less than 7 months is shocking. And obviously there was a lot of lead in, but people still forget that their very first release from Radiance Films came out on January 2nd of this year. January 2nd. That is astonishing.
Yeah, I've got, I'm well behind now on their releases, but yeah, we had him on our podcast, I think in December when he had announced at least all of the titles that are now coming out and
Yeah.
whatnot. There've been more that have been announced since, but yeah, just putting out fantastic films, and the quality of the releases have been also incredibly great as well. I know they just had the first box set came out, I think, this past week.
In the UK, yeah, the US version is still about 2 weeks out.
Yeah, I think it's coming out like August 8th, maybe in the
Yeah.
US. It's the Cosa Nostra set. I think that's
Correct.
yeah. I always get the two words mixed up. But right next to me, I've got all these Radiance releases, so we're in the same wavelength, Ryan, you and
Nice.
I. And I got all these next to me. I got the most recent one I got was the Hotspot,
Ooh.
which I ordered back. I think this was a June release.
Yeah.
Yes. I've been getting into a lot of Dennis Hopper's work now over the last little while. So I'm trying to get all of his directorial stuff, really.
Yeah.
Because it was always
Well,
a blind
and
spot for me.
I mean, honestly, for tonight, look at that. Actor turned director, Hopper, acted first and then came back after a break and directed some astonishing films. I mean, the big one from last year that got a lot of attention from us and from the Shelf Shock Rewind Awards is, you know, we got that wonderful release of Out of the Blue from BFI and Severin. And Hopper's gotten a lot of love from the boutiques over the last couple of years.
You know, it's nice. You know what I mean? It's really super awesome because such a unique individual career. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And I don't think he was one of those. I don't think he was appreciated while he was with us, and he's getting a lot more appreciation now that people are discovering and rediscovering and reanalyzing his work and all that kind of stuff. That's what I really love about cinema and film is that it's constant. You know what I mean? It's flowing, and we can always go back to it. We can always look at it and talk about it and all that kind of cool stuff.
And Craig in the chat says the last movie was a thrill to restore. He was one of the individuals that was on the restoration. That's amazing. And right after that, of course, Stan says the last movie is his best. Man,
I still need to see it. I still need to get it. I've been trying to get my hands on the Indicator limited edition, but it's been long out of print. So I've been combing eBay for it, and I'm trying to get it for a decent price. But that's the chance you take when you wait on these things.
Right.
The limited editions, they are indeed limited, and then as soon as they go, the prices go through the roof on places like eBay and stuff.
And that's the thing with the limited editions. A lot of the times you lose that booklet. And I know you were like me. A lot of the times we definitely try to read those and give them the attention they deserve. So yeah, I'm all about trying to get the release with the booklet as well.
Yeah, I like having just the original complete edition of something. If it's missing something, that little thing will bother me. Maybe it's an OCD thing or a particular collector's thing, but that's just me.
I agree. Anything else you want to highlight before we jump into some announcements, my friend?
No, I'm good. I'm good to dive in.
Well, speaking of Imprint, let's go to them first because they've got some great stuff lined up for October. Keep in mind, all of these are slated for October 25th from Imprint coming from Australia, and all available to pre-order now, and all will be able to be picked up on, Orbit, Diabolic, Grindhouse eventually in the U.S., let's see. We got another comment on last movie. Hopper described it as painting on film. I felt it was similar to a song. It's not a straightforward linear story. It makes it much more enjoyable to rewatch as you might a great song. Very well said. That's amazing. John wants to know what's on my tee tonight. This is a Reservoir Dog shirt.
Nice.
Had to. Let's see. And I think that's it. So first up, we got The Orphanage. This one is from 2007. And I loved this movie. First time I saw it. This one was special to me. This is a Spanish horror film coming to Blu-ray for the first time in Australia ever. And this one is going to have a new audio commentary by Xavier Aldana Reyes, new video essay by Miranda Corcoran on Gothic children, new video essay by film scholar Rachel Knightley on memories and ghosts. And then they've got a bunch of archival features on here. They've got an interview with Juan Antonio Bayona and Guillermo del Toro, who was the producer on this, I believe. They got some deleted scenes, shooting the credits, some trailers, but then a full second disc that's going to have When Laura Grew Up, a featurette on the filmmakers, featurette on the makeup effects, table reads, and a whole bunch. The set, the sounds, animatics, all kinds of stuff. Q&A with the director. There's a lot coming in this set. This one looks like a pretty astonishing release.
Oh yeah, we talked about it a bit when it was announced last week on our show, and yeah, I was talk about surprised. I was uh, surprising in the sense that not only is it getting a Blu-ray release again, because it got one here, I think in the States many years ago, probably I don't know, several years ago, but it's getting the two, like the 2 disc deluxe editions, getting the
Yeah.
deluxe packaging, to the top loading special edition packaging and new stuff. Yeah, it's a film that like you said, I've always really liked it. I didn't talk about the plot at all because I feel like it's a film you need to watch because
Yep.
it's a mystery behind it. You know what I mean? And I described it as having the similar vibe to Del Toro's type of horror films, where
Yes.
it's not usually what you're expecting. It's more about atmosphere and stuff like that. I'm thinking like Devil's Backbone type of stuff going on
Yep.
here. That's how I kind of compared it.
Yeah, and it certainly feels like that. It is one that through and through, it's got this very unique style, and one that I can certainly appreciate. Stan in the chat says this looks expensive, and it kind of is. For an imprint set, it's $70 Australian, so you're looking probably $50 US before shipping, which means once it gets to Orbit, Diabolic, or Grindhouse, you're probably looking at 55-ish to buy, somewhere around
Yeah,
there.
it'll probably be that range. Yeah.
So yeah, this will be a little bit of a pricey release. Next up is Wind Chill with Emily Blunt, kind of an early one for her, 2007. This is on Blu-ray again for the first time in Australia. That's really cool that they keep doing that. And Australia's had some problems we're going to talk about in a little while, of course. This one says, for 2 college students, sharing a quiet ride home together becomes a twisted nightmare when the car they're driving is forced off a lonesome road in the middle of a snowstorm. Now, with the car inoperable and the temperature dropping, they soon realize the cold is the least of their worries. I don't think I've ever seen this one, but it sounds really intriguing.
I have seen this one, and it's exactly as the description describes, but there's a bit of a supernatural twist with it. I'll just say that. The highlight of the film, I think, is Emily Blunt. She's, a great actress. If you've seen any of
Always,
her
yeah.
work, she's kind of always been a really great actress, and she's really great in this film. And she's kind of worth watching just for that. But yeah, it's kind of a film that, set in one location, haunting kind of stuff going on. I thought they were going to do more with the film, but it's relatively straightforward as to what you just
Hmm.
described, trying to survive. But even then, it's not surviving you're not really surviving the elements, you're surviving the situation in which you're in. I thought it was going to be a lot like Adam Green's the movie Frozen, which is a film that I don't know if a lot of
Love that
people know,
movie.
where these 2 people stuck in a ski, oh, I think it's 3 people stuck in a ski lift, um, and which is a scary real life scenario that
Yeah.
it's probably happened. It's probably happened, and what would you do in that scenario? And it's them trying to kind of survive that very real life scenario. I thought that's what this was kind of going to be, but since it takes that supernatural twist, it becomes something else. That's what I'll say.
Hmm. Yeah, I really loved Frozen. I think I've shared that one with probably 10 or 15 people because I loved it so much. That was one that got a lot of playtime around, I think it came out like 2010-ish or something like that.
Yes, I think he did that after. I think Adam Green did that after he did Hatchet.
After the
Um,
first one, yeah.
yes, after Virtual, because I'm pretty sure he didn't direct Hatchet 2. He came back and did Hatchet 3 though, because I think he
And
did
Victor
Frozen
Crowley.
instead.
Yeah.
Yes, and Victor Crowley.
Jason from Culture Shock Releasing says they're announcing their new distributor next week. Wow. Along with the new release announcement. Well, that's freaking awesome. That's going to be a big week next week for a lot of
Yeah.
companies.
Luckily, I was talking with Ryan beforehand. Luckily, all of that information I'm assuming is coming the first, which is Tuesday, and all and then all that kind of stuff dropping and whatnot. Yeah, it's gonna be a busy week next week. The first week of the month is always kind of a
Always.
busy. It's either the last week's busy or the first week's busy. That seems to be the case.
John Peters is saying that Adam Green did Hatchet 2, not 3.
Oh, okay. I got it backwards.
So he did 1, 2, 4. Next up, Bug is coming from Imprint as well. This is one that had gotten a 4K announcement from Kino that has since been canceled because William Friedkin takes so long to approve masters and causes so many problems. So because of that, this looks like this might be the release to get of this film. This is getting an audio commentary by Friedkin, a new audio commentary by Troy Howarth and Tony Strauss of WK Books and editor of Wang's Chop magazine, a discussion with Friedkin, and then an introduction featurette. And again, this looks like a pretty solid release. And if we're not going to get it in the States, this might be one I got to look at.
Yeah, I Bug is something I've had on DVD for a long time, and I've just been waiting. I think, as many people have been waiting for the Blu-ray release, and I was super happy when Kino announced it, not so happy when it went away, and now this one occurred. So it's playing with my emotions. It's
Right.
playing with my emotions, very yo-yo type of way. And yeah, this is another a kind of an underrated Friedkin film, I think. I feel like his later work is definitely more not ignored, but just not really looked at in any type of positive way, because he started off so strong in the 70s
Right.
with, with The Exorcist, with Sorcerer, and then why am I not the French Connection? For some reason, I'm blanking on that. With the French Connection, I mean, you do those 3 films at that same time. It's hard to compare afterwards. But Bug, I think, is super underrated.
And my only real worry is this came out in 2006, and I'm not sure if this has a new restoration since then. If I remember right, this supposedly looked pretty bad. So I hope that there was something done to this, because Imprint has been sort of touch and go on some of their releases. Some of them, and they're not doing most of their restorations. It's studio supplied. So
Right.
I get that. I just hope that this one is decent.
Yeah, it just says 1080p high definition presentation. So it could literally be whatever master they're getting from whichever studio put it out
Right.
originally, and which I'm not even sure what that case is. Which is a shame. It's a shame because it would be nice. I think the DVD, which came out in 2007, was put out by Lionsgate, so that doesn't really tell us much. That's kind of
No, not really.
an indie distributor, anyways.
Yeah. Culture Shock gave a little more of a hint. They said they're doing a new horror film first, followed by an 80s horror film, 90s horror film, and then the Late Night Classics Volume 2. Man, so they got a pretty good year ahead, too. That's great. Awesome. Next up from Imprint is The Mad Room from 1969. And I know literally nothing about this movie. I'm hoping you've seen this one. This is on Blu-ray for the first time worldwide. I love how Imprint does this, usually once or twice a month at least. This one is starring the Stella Stevens and Shelley Winters together. And this says Ellen Hardy gets a rude awakening when she discovers that her brother and sister are scheduled to leave their mental institution. As children, they were put there after killing their parents. Ellen, who now lives in the house of an old widow, Mrs. Armstrong, takes them in. But if their secret gets out, it could jeopardize Ellen's plans to wed Mrs. Armstrong's stepson. I mean, that's a wild synopsis.
Yeah, it's a wild synopsis, and I feel like that synopsis may in fact be better than the film. And that's just my opinion, obviously. Because I going into it, I'm like, wow, that sounds very intriguing. You know what I mean? You've got this whole mystery of these 2 young kids who may be rehabilitated, maybe not be rehabilitated. What's going on with that? They don't really focus on that, which I found to be the most interesting part. They really focus on the Stella Stevens character and her having to deal with all of those things going on, like what's going on with the Shelley Winters character, what's going on with her siblings, the person that she's marrying coincidentally, which is kind of the reason why she's doing all this, really doesn't factor into a good part of the movie. But I thought it would kind of delve into more of what the 2 younger characters would be going and would be doing, what's going on with them. What was their rehabilitation like? Why do they need this thing called a quote unquote mad room, which is this room where if they kind of have this psychotic mental health issue that's going on, it's a room in which they can go to and kind of deal with it on their own, or kind of decompress, or kind of essentially a safe space, or what would be considered a safe space in 1969. They don't really get into all of those more complex things, which I thought it would. I was kind of expecting a more of like what the Psycho sequels did with Norman Bates' character, where they really showed us what his mental state is and how it would slip and revert back to his old ways and things like that. The film really doesn't concentrate on more of those more interesting aspects, but it's a fine film. Shelley Winters is kind of a bit unhinged in the film. She's always great. She was a great actress.
Good. Next up is Night of the Eagle, and this is going to be one of the double disc releases. And this one says that Peter Wyngarde stars in this frightening horror from 1962, coming to Blu-ray for the first time in Australia. A successful college professor discovers that his wife has been practicing black magic for years. How do you just discover that about your wife? Anyways, they then fall prey to evil forces and spells cast by someone else from the college. This is going to have a new audio commentary by Flipside founders Vic Pratt and William Fowler, new commentary by Scott Harrison, an archival commentary by the screenwriter Richard Matheson, new filmed appreciation with the author David Huckvale, new Fritz Lieber's Conjured Wife video essay by academic Rachel Knightley, an interview, and that is it. But this is going to have nice limited edition slipcase with that unique art. And I read this wrong. This is not 2 disc. That is a double-sided sleeve, but it's got the alternate art on the other side with the alt title. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, this film is actually pretty solid. I mean, I think people with a more modern sensibility would actually rather like it. It's dealing with, like you just said, magic, witchcraft, spells, and nefarious things going on that you're not aware of, things like that. So as you were saying, like how did he discover it? He literally just opened a drawer and she had like candles. It's not like she was performing like ritual sacrifices and things like that in the woods. It's not quite like that. But what's cool about it is you see like it's something that you think is negative, like witchcraft and spell casting and stuff like that, actually is a positive thing because his wife it was using it for protective reasons, and once those protective reasons go away, things start to fall apart, things escalate, and then madness ensues, really. And that's kind of the film. I really rather enjoyed it. I'm not a big fan of the title, Night of the Eagle. It's not the best title, but the alternate title I don't think works either. I brought it up with Steven when we did our most recent episode, and I'm just like, I don't know the alternative title I think was Burn Witch Burn.
Yep.
And it's like that's not even accurate as well, but it's a lot closer than Night of the Eagle, I'll say.
Seems very 1962 of them.
It does.
All right, we got into some odd ones now. We are away from Imprint, and we got a random RLJE Steelbook wave coming to Walmart. All of these are coming on November 14th, and the first of them is this Bone Tomahawk Steelbook, and they're using the art that they've used on a release, I believe, in the UK prior. But the big thing, a lot of people are upset about these, oddly, because they're not coming as 4K discs or whatever. They're not repressing new discs. These are the exact same discs. It's just a packaging upgrade for some people. Yeah. Love this movie, though.
I'll say this. I remember when this movie came out in 2015, and there was a lot of buzz behind it in the indie film viewing world. And I think once it hit streaming and paid VOD and stuff like that, that's when people really grabbed onto it. Like you're saying, it's if you already own the movie, there's probably no reason to rebuy it.
Right.
If it's the same exact disc, there's nothing, unless you like this packaging better. If you're a big Steelbook fan and Steelbooks are your thing, then of course that would be, this would be appropriate for you. But I've been fine with them just using the original like art poster on a lot of the Blu-ray releases and stuff. It's an interesting horror film. I would say that.
It's got especially one interesting scene that everybody always alludes to.
There's gore in here, people. So for those of you who haven't seen it, it does get quite violent. I know people are very particular about those things.
Well, and I'm trying to see if I could find it before we needed to go to the next title, but this one, let me see. I'm almost there. So tech specs on this. This was filmed on the Red Epic Dragon, and it was printed on 35 millimeter. So I don't know. It only has a digital intermediate. I doubt that they could even do a real 4K on this.
It'd probably be up-converted.
Yeah, and most of these companies are knowingly very vocal about, we're not going to do fake 4K upgrades. So a lot of these will never be on 4K. And there are people in the comments saying, no 4K, no buy. you can't be like that with these. I mean, some of these, they might be able to restore them to be cleaner in 10 years or whatever when they need to be restored. But also, this came out 8 years ago, and it was shot in a way that probably doesn't need some kind of intense restoration. I don't know.
I agree with you. I agree with not everything needs a 4K re-release. And not everything, like you just said, can have a quality 4K re-release. Quality meaning that it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile for them to make. It's worthwhile for us to buy. Yeah, so I do agree with you on that.
And 4K stuff is not cheap. So if they can't, they won't. But speaking of 4K, this one was released on 4K previously, so this will be a UHD disc. They are also doing color out of space. I got to admit, this does look like a really nice steelbook if you're a steelbook person.
Yeah, that cover is just an accurate description of the insanity of that movie. If you've got Nicolas Cage and this kind of sci-fi horror crazy thing going on, yeah, it's appropriate to have a cover like that. It's totally appropriate.
Anything Lovecraft is already weird, and then you add Nicholas Cage, and it's going to look like this. I want to see a Lovecraftian Nicholas Sparks book now.
That's got to be a combination that should happen someday. I mean, why not? We get everything nowadays, so it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibilities.
Oh man!
But yeah, if you haven't seen Color Out of Space, I think it's definitely one of Nicolas Cage's most unique and probably, I wouldn't say better films that he's done recently, but it's good. I really liked it. Directed by Richard Stanley. It's based off of the H.P. Lovecraft thing, so we got some sci-fi horror stuff going on, and you got Nicolas Cage.
Yep. Video Store Review says, I believe the original Color Out of Space 4K did not have HDR. Maybe they've corrected that. Bad news. These are just the exact same discs.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I was just gonna say, they're just gonna say that same thing. These are probably just the same disc.
Literally, they're doing nothing new on the discs.
It's amazing how we've got new format, same old tactics.
Well, although this one is an odd duck in this whole wave here. So the man who killed Hitler and then the Bigfoot. This is such a wordy title. This is also coming out, but this is getting a 4K disc. And now the reason this is happening, because this didn't get a Blu-ray disc in the States, but it got, I can't think. This got a Blu-ray disc in the States, not a 4K. But it got a 4K in Europe previously. So they are just taking that disc and putting it in the US release. No idea why we didn't get the 4K previously. But here we are.
Yeah, maybe different. Is it? That's so interesting. Is it the same company that put it out here that put it out there?
Well, RLJE did not distribute it worldwide.
Oh, okay.
But it all came from the same master and all that, I believe.
Yeah, okay. I don't know if it's like a distribution rights issue, contracts, stuff like that. That's the only thing I could think of why they couldn't do it here or just didn't do it here, really.
Right.
But yeah, this is, like you're saying, this is a 4K upgrade.
Yeah, this is an actual upgrade. Although I'm willing to bet this one probably won't have HDR either. Because RLJE, I don't think, has done that for any of their 4K discs. I may be wrong, but they're also very cheap most of the time. Next one, they're also doing Psycho Gorman. Wholeheartedly recommend this title, but again, if you already have it, probably not much of a reason to buy this steelbook, but this movie is fantastic. What do you think of this one?
I do agree. Yep. It is a unique film, to say the least. I know Steven is a big fan of this movie. I think he imported I want to say the Umbrella edition or something like that. Someone had put out a special edition of it. I think it was Umbrella, and he straight up imported it because he liked the movie so much. Talk about a unique, low budget, almost like a Power Rangers-esque type of movie, but rated R and ridiculous. It just, what a brilliant film.
Right.
Truly, you can't even describe it without showing it to someone. That's how type of a unique film it is.
I would agree there. And this is one of those films that unfortunately has had many releases. So yes. I think most people probably have this already, but if not, and you're a steelbook collector, now's the time. Joe Jack has an interesting point here. Says, I thought HDR was kind of the whole point of 4K. And I will say it's a huge point of 4K, but also resolution is the other main part of that. And when you look at the resolution, the 4K is literally going to bring much more information to your actual screen. But HDR is also this big color gamut that you're changing, and that usually, especially if you're watching on a quality panel, that's going to have the bigger impact on your viewing experience than the actual 4K resolution, probably. Yeah. Then, and this one I've not seen. They're also doing Vesper from 2022. Did you see this one?
I have not seen this film, actually. So
this one was way under my radar.
Same here. I don't think I've even maybe heard of it, maybe didn't hear about it, but I have not seen this film at all.
I think I remember a previous release, because I remember this odd-shaped space station or bus or something. I don't know what this is, but I remember it having that dome and then these legs coming out of it. But yeah, completely missed this one.
Yeah, it had a Blu-ray release back in January of this year here in the US.
Oh, interesting.
And that seems to be its only. No, it had a 4K release in Germany, and then that seems to be its only two releases that I can see. Is Blu-ray back in January, this steelbook, and then a 4K in Germany. That's it.
Interesting. Carrie Mulligan was talking about Psycho Gorman. Says, in 2021, I rented a theater and showed Psycho Gorman and Why Don't You Just Die as a double feature. And I have to say, that sounds like an incredible double feature. Why Don't You Just Die is so slept on. I love that movie. Did you see that one?
I don't think I've seen that film, no.
It's an Arrow film that is like an Edgar Wright, Quentin Tarantino mashup almost.
Okay. You've got me.
So fun. It is so fun.
I don't think no, I did not see it. I'm checking my letterbox now. No, I have not seen it, but I remember hearing about it.
It's been on sale many times in the Arrow sales, and it goes for fairly cheap because it was not a big, flagship title.
Gotcha.
Griff says Vesper is pretty fun, kind of similar to Prospect with a low budget aspect, but it's worth a watch. Nice. Alrighty. Then they're doing Werewolves Within. This is a movie that is, in my opinion, either the best or the second best video game adaptation to film ever. At least up there with Detention. Even Super Mario Brothers from this year is pretty good, but this movie is great. Love this movie. Directed by Josh Rubin. There's an interview on the channel with him. This is just a really wonderful showcase for Sam Richardson to do his wonderful work, and then Milana Weintraub, who is always great. She is the AT&T girl that everybody loves.
Yeah, she is.
She was wonderful in this.
She's actually, she's a very good actress. I mean, I know she got her start doing, like you said, the AT&T commercials, but she's had some acting and some regards, some movies, some TV stuff and whatnot. She was supposed to be Squirrel Girl. If for those of you who comic superhero fans, she was supposed to be Squirrel Girl. They shot, I think, a whole pilot for it, and I just think it never got picked up or something. And this was one of them. This was years ago now. But every once in a while, you'll see pictures from, the promotion they were doing at the time and whatnot. But yeah, she's a really good actress. And this is a really good kind of one of those like Tucker and Dale Must Die and like all these kind of like these horror comedies that are also satirical as well. And they know they're satirical, but they're written very smartly, very intelligently. And they really, they play very well, in my opinion. This also had like Harvey Guillen is in this film as well, who is in What We Do in the Shadows TV series, which is amazing. And this does have a very Taika Waititi type of written What We Do in the Shadows movie-esque vibe to it as well. So if you like those things, you'll definitely like this movie. I still need to get it. I don't have it in my collection at all.
And a lot of those Taika Waititi vibes are because Josh Rubin is really he came from College Humor. So he's really from this upstart improv group that is supposed to be able to react on a dime. He still does a lot of stuff with Dropout TV, which is an offshoot of College Humor that is absolutely wonderful and kind of breaking the mold for streaming and doing better than a lot of their peers at this point. So yeah, if you're interested in that kind of humor, Werewolves Within it's fun. It's not really scary, but it is technically a horror comedy, but it's also a very wholesome movie. Like a lot of it just makes you feel warm. You're watching just a fun time, basically. Terry says he found a review for the German 4K of The Man Who Killed Hitler and then Bigfoot, and it appears that it has HDR10, so that could be a positive. Then the guru steps in. Craig from Deaf Crocodile says there are so many 4K releases that are sourced from materials that have far, far less than 4K of resolution. And then says it's really pointless if there is no HDR, and why do it? I can promise our first UHD release will be sourced from the ONEG, and that's not a scoop. We don't have one planned yet. Good to know. And that's why there's certain companies that you can just trust, and I appreciate that from Deaf Crocodile.
Yeah, for the most part, I would say this: interviewing people within the boutique label world, they know what they're doing. Like they're very extremely passionate, very knowledgeable, and they know what they're doing. And all the things that you're thinking of at home, chances are they've thought about it already as well, because they're fans and consumers for the most part, like us. At least all the people Steve and I have been able to interview, they're very much start out as fans first.
That's true, and usually you can tell those companies that are doing that.
Yes.
Let's see. We got one from Kino, and then there was another RLJE, so we're not quite done with them yet. Kino announced The Ballad of Little Joe from 1993 with Bill Hopkins, Heather Graham, Ian McKellen. Pretty decent cast in this one. I'm not sure I've seen this. This is not the final art. Just know this is coming. This is one of those eventual titles from Kino. We don't have a date yet, but it will have a new restoration, which is a good thing. And it's written and directed by Maggie Greenwald.
Yeah, this was unfortunately one I did not get to see. So I don't know anything about it other than the fact that it seems to have a great cast in it.
Killer cast. Then the other RLJE is Arizona. This one had a 4K disc, so this one will also be in 4K. This is a Danny McBride title. It's got Luke Wilson in it as well. This one I've never seen. It's supposed to be pretty good, but yeah, Arizona. I believe this is the last of the RLJE steelbooks. Let's see. Coming soon, Kino is the Sting of boutique labels.
Oh yeah.
They do that a lot.
I've reached the point where I don't even keep track of the stuff that's coming soon. If it comes back up again, I'll just mention it again now on the podcast because I just can't keep track of it. Because it's some titles they'll announce and you won't hear about them for like a year.
Then more than that sometimes.
Some they'll announce and then you'll hear about them in a week. There's no rhyme or reason.
Right.
Just bring them up whenever they show up.
Midlife Media with a great point here says Arizona's pretty great. I got the blue for $1 at Dollar Tree. So this is going to be like a $26 4K steelbook. Keep in mind, if you want the movie, you can probably get it for very, very inexpensive.
Right.
Next up, this one's a big deal. Kino someday again will be releasing Uncle Buck on 4K. The wonderful John Candy in one of his most loved roles. This is coming with a new HDR Dolby Vision Master from a 4K scan of the OCN. Of course, this is the classic with Macaulay Culkin, Laurie Metcalf, Mike Starr's in this. Written and directed by the one and only John Hughes. What do you think of Uncle Buck?
Yeah, this was when I brought this up on our recent episode, and it is a big one. It's a big release not only because it's a very much beloved cable classic. I feel like this thing is always on the cable somewhere. I think that's where I discovered it. But the fact that it's a Universal title, and a lot of those early Universal Blu-rays from circa over a decade ago were not good when they came out, and they needed to be remastered and re-released in some type of way. And Universal slowly is getting to that. They're slowly doing it, whether they're doing it themselves or whether they're marketing them out to a Kino or someone like that. They're getting these done, and hopefully this looks a heck of a lot better. And I don't think the Blu-ray came with any special features at all. So this is going to be an upgrade in many aspects if it's done well. We don't know any details on it right now.
Yeah, this is one that I foresee them hopefully doing at least one special feature. Come on. But yeah, it would be nice to get some more because as far as I remember, there was not much, if anything, on that Blu-ray release. Let's see. Deaf Crocodile says, bad HDR is a waste of time. Unfortunately, there's a lot of bad HDR. A film source release should remain looking like film. HDR allows the digital reproduction of film's wide color range. Exactly. Ernest Dog 20. When is Perfect Weapon coming out from Kino? I haven't heard an update in a while because we don't know. That will be a while. Next up, this one is coming from Wellgo USA, and it is called Goodbye Monster. This is from 2022. Just a Blu-ray release of an animation film. The animation on this actually looks pretty fun. I don't know anything else about this movie, but it sounds interesting.
Same here.
Going to the next one. Makeflix announced Bikini Drive-In from 1995. This is available on their site now. The first 1,000 units of this are going to be autographed on the back by Michelle Bauer. And you can see what the back looks like here. This gets a new HD transfer from the original camera negative, commentary with Fred Olen Ray and Richard Gabi, Fred's 1980 to 1990s 35 millimeter blooper and outtake reel, drive-in trailer collection, drive-in snack bar collection, 2 episodes of Retro Media's drive-in theater, video interviews with a handful of individuals, an alternate endings video, and then some fast facts at the bottom there for you. Makeflix. My question for you on this one: do you have anything from Makeflix? Because I feel like a lot of people overlook their stuff.
No, I don't have any of that. No, I don't have any of that stuff. I would love recommendations for anyone who may have them.
Well, some of their bigger ones are, if you love certain actors and actresses from the 90s, you'll be able to cull those out. Famously, they just did the Killer Nerd duology recently. This is a big one for them. They did Jacko, and that sold out super quick. Yeah, they've done a lot of those very 90s titles specifically.
Yeah, I'm just looking at some of their releases now on Blu-ray.com, and yeah, they seem to be very much in that B2C movie drive-in type of cult, almost grindhouse-ish type of films. That seemed to be their thing. There's definitely a niche for that.
Absolutely. Next up, this is the big one. October 9th in the UK. And this is super confusing because it is a UK release, but it does say limited to 2,000 globally. We are getting The Exorcist on 4K, and it's coming in this beautiful large hardbox release. This is going to have The Exorcist BFI Film Classics book, double-sided lobby Mark Kermode card reproduction, unique leather grain outer slipcase, a 40-page booklet and clamshell box, 3 behind-the-scenes art cards, a steelbook, 3 iconic scene art cards, sticker of authenticity, and then double-sided theatrical poster reproduction. When I posted this, we didn't know any features yet, but this one is going to have some of the documentaries and stuff that have been released for this film previously. This is the steelbook in the UK, and I mean, this is a pretty wonderful release that unfortunately looked to have sold out the day this was announced.
I was just going to say that exact thing, that the pre-orders for this sold out almost immediately. This is gone. This is gone. There was a lot of Exorcist talk this week on social media surrounding this. Not only that, but just the edition that Warner Brothers is putting out here in the Region A land with the most atrocious cover you could possibly ever think of to put for The Exorcist. I'm just shocked that shouldn't be shocked, but I am shocked at some of the laziness that goes on with a lot of the mainstream studios when it comes to the covers for a lot of their Blu-rays and 4K UHD releases. I mean, there are people out there who do this professionally for a living that can probably whip up something very quickly.
Right.
You know what I mean? And oftentimes they just go with kind of the bare minimum or the cheapest way out. And that feels like that's what the Warner Brothers did with the UHD release here in the US. Now, I don't know if it's a finalized cover or if they're going to change it. Oh, it's finalized. Oh, great. I had a sliver of hope there and you took it away from me.
That's final.
It's gone. Completely gone.
So let's get into this because this is like rant of the week status for me. So we just saw what the steelbook looks like for the UK. This is the steelbook for the US that you can pre-order in the from Best Buy.
The Best Buy exclusive, yes.
And honestly, I don't hate this cover, but I would much rather have the theatrical poster like the UK. I think this is interesting. At least it could have been much worse. I think that honestly, the Exorcist artwork is not even the worst one that we're going to talk about this.
I was going to say I think it did get worse with the regular Blu-ray edition artwork. I mean, at least this looks like some effort was put into it. You know what I mean? It looks
Yeah.
like, you know, I like the inner art, I like the outer art, I like the aesthetic they're going with. At least it's got that feel of The Exorcist.
Yeah.
The one, I don't know if you're gonna pop it up, so I'm probably
I'm
jumping the
not.
gun here.
No, I'm not. The
It
standard.
doesn't look like The Exorcist at
Nope.
all. It just looks like someone playing with Photoshop who's learning how to use Photoshop.
So
You know what I mean?
my biggest thing about this, it's coming from the studio who is always complaining about losing money. How do you not have the same artwork in both regions to save money on printing? That's the biggest thing for me. I
Um,
don't.
yeah, unless the artwork that's being used in the 4K is commissioned by a different company. Like, let's say whoever's putting out that big deluxe edition that we just talked about, maybe they're the ones paying for the artwork as well. That they want specific new artwork, or they want their own specific artwork, their own specific aesthetic. Maybe they are paying for it, because if the case like you just said, why would Warner Brothers be paying for it twice?
Right.
Or, you know, I mean, it's a company that, it's very obvious right now, if you haven't been paying attention, that they are trying to save as much money any way they possibly can. They are cutting
Absolutely.
corners like you would not believe in many retrospects. But it's yeah, I agree with you. I don't understand why they would do that if that is indeed the case. But man, it's very unfortunate, because The Exorcist is one of the most well-known horror films ever. Even
One of the
people
most
who haven't seen
iconic
it,
too. Like some of
yeah,
the
the
most
most iconic.
iconic imagery ever.
Yeah, like even people who haven't seen the movie know what The Exorcist is, or they've seen certain clips, or they've seen a
Right.
poster or whatnot. Every year, I always see people post on social media of going to certain locations from The Exorcist and posting about it on social media and stuff like that. It's a thing. You know what I mean? I don't know how you could screw with this one up. You know, seems like a slam dunk. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? One of your most iconic films of all time, getting a brand new anniversary edition, because it is, what's what, the
50th.
50th anniversary? That's a big one. How do
50th
you not?
anniversary and first 4K release of the film.
And it coincides with your 100th year anniversary of your studio as well. And you've already done a whole big push with all of your 100th year anniversary
Right.
stuff. Some of it interesting, some of it not so interesting. But it's, yeah, whoever's making the decisions over there, sometimes they don't know what they're doing, in my opinion.
I fully agree. For my thoughts, I do like the Best Buy Steelbook. I think it's not bad, but I do think this is literally perfect. Having
Mm,
the poster art on the front and then just an iconic image on the back, that is the way to go. That is the easiest slam dunk you can make with a Steelbook like this. It's absolutely perfect.
yeah,
Now,
it's
go ahead.
exactly what you said.
The details on this release are where it gets weird, because it sold out day one for the UK release, but then there is another, like, this is like the ultimate, I can't even remember the exact title they're calling it. It's like the ultimate limited collection or something like that, but then there's a second one that's like the super limited collection, and it's just the exact same release without the outer box and without the BFI book. That one, I believe, is going to come to Orbit and maybe like Diabolic and a couple others if they can get some in. It's not a guarantee, but the big giant one is a big deal. So, yeah, that one, it does appear to be gone. And of course, this is going to be like scalpers heaven. There are already pre-orders for this where somebody's locked in their pre-order and they're selling the pre-order on eBay for like $250.
I've seen that. Wow. Yeah, I didn't. That's become a thing over the last few years. Selling the pre-orders of an item. I've seen that for
Yep.
video games. I've seen that for movies, and stuff like that. I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know that was an option.
It
Yeah,
should not happen.
it's yeah. I wouldn't personally do it. That's just me. Uh, yeah, this is
Jesus.
getting so many. They're not making this easy on the consumer about the difference between all of these editions, where to get them, where not to get them, where to
Right.
pre-order them, where not to pre-order them. It's making it very, very confusing unnecessarily.
Craig from Deaf Crocodile says, I could be wrong as I'm not a big Steelbook buyer, but I thought the Steelbooks were collectible for the new artwork. That not always the case. A lot of people want a Steelbook primarily for the iconic artwork. And a lot of people, myself included, I've got 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got about 30 steelbooks on display that I can see the outer art, and I'd like it to be good artwork. So something like the Exorcist poster art, it's like displaying the poster in a way. So I love stuff like that. Let's see. Sibner says there are some going for $600. Jesus. And then Griff says, unfortunately, they do that at San Diego Comic-Con all the time with new and exclusive toys and collectibles. Gross.
Yeah, the Funko Pops and stuff like that. Yeah, that's been doing that for like years. It's wild.
Right.
Yeah, the aftermarket can be so crazy for so many different things. That's just the collecting world, I guess.
Yeah, at least no matter what, you'll be able to get the 4K disc eventually, and I just hope it's a solid transfer and they do it justice, because this is,
Yeah, that's
again,
what gets lost, and I think a lot of this sometimes is how does the movie actually look? You
right.
know, what type of work was done on that technical level? Yes, the aesthetics of it and the bells and whistles and the swag and all that kind of stuff is awesome, but I think it does come down to how good of the quality of the actual release is, actual
Right.
film on the disc. Because if that's not good, that's a huge downer, I think.
Well, and one thing that admittedly I did gloss over a little bit, which I think is important here. This is going to be like a 5-disc release in the UK, not in the US, but in the UK. And the reason is they're doing a 4K disc for the theatrical version and a 4K disc for the director's cut. So we are getting UHDs for both, and then Blu-rays for both, and then a Blu-ray with a bunch of special features on it. So yeah, this will be a solid release for the people that buy it from the scalpers. Speaking of bad art, you ready to talk about, in my opinion, the worst art of the week and maybe of the whole year?
Yes. Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, Rosemary's Baby coming to 4K in the US on October 10th. This is coming from Paramount. Hopefully it's a good solid restoration. What is this art, Andrew?
I'm not quite sure. Abstract, I guess. I mean, it's yeah, of all of the iconic imagery from Rosemary's Baby, all of the great poster art and all that kind of stuff, interesting that they went with this. I don't know why they went with this, but
Yeah,
they tried to be different. I mean, I don't. Yeah, it just boggles my mind about what the idea is like. Like this had to go through like levels of like people being like, "Yep, that's good. Yep, that's good. Yep, that's good."
wow.
Before it
Okay,
gets to us.
so all of these comments real quick. I said worst one, and then John Peters said LOL what? Zombies Ate My Arm said a vampire pig. Sibner says the teeth that makes no sense. And then Deaf Crocodile Craig says hot take, I don't hate it. Stan Geezy says, I don't know, it's kind of kitschy. Silent Mandible says, I like it personally. I
don't think it's worse than the Exorcist one.
Really?
Yeah. I'm talking about the Exorcist, the one that you didn't post.
Right,
the regular 4K UHD one.
Yeah, the one I'm hiding on purpose.
Yeah, the one that literally looks like someone just like cut that out of a picture and like copy and pasted it there, like dragged and dropped it onto the cover of something. At least this one shows like they tried to go for some type of artistic merit in it. You know, they went for something at least remotely original.
I think maybe I'm the idiot here. I don't know if everybody's like me. I think I finally just saw what they were going for here with this, with the silhouette, like the negative image here. It was never clicking, but now I see it. It's an actual mouth opening and the nose sticking out and the two horns at the top.
Mm.
I saw the white of the eye, but I never saw the actual face. And now I see it, and it's okay, but it's still like very weird. Very, very weird.
Ooh, yeah, now that I see, yeah, I see that as well. At least like I said, it shows some type of originality. Like they're going for something as opposed to being like, here's the Exorcist. Go.
Right.
You know?
Huh.
Go about your day. It's not it's not. I'm glad that the movie is actually getting a 4K release. Unfortunately, unfortunately, I have the Criterion already, and I know those special features probably won't port over. I'm not, at least I'm not sure. I got to do the comparison side to
Right.
side. I think I have to do the comparison when it comes to the Exorcist Blu-ray that I have as well, eventually. So those are just extra things that I've got to worry about as a collector.
Yeah, and Sibner here with the best comment on this is the teeth on the belly doesn't even make sense when it's the devil's kid. Why would he be biting the belly?
He'd be eating the child.
Right. I don't get it. Anyways, I'm glad this is getting a release. Obviously, it's always kind of a toss-up if a Polanski title is going to get a release. That seems to be questionable for some studios. So I'm glad this is getting out there. Hopefully the restoration looks great. Again, Paramount can be kind of hit or miss. So yeah, we shall see. This is another anniversary release. This is 55th. I put an interview up with Chris O'Neill this week. Give it a listen if you don't mind. It's pretty interesting. Gentleman from Ireland that is doing his best to deliver film to basically the middle of nowhere. Let's see. Next up, we talked about this earlier, and I love the look of the steelbook. Yeah. Lords of Dogtown coming from Mill Creek on September 26th as a Walmart exclusive steelbook. And the best thing, if you pre-order this right now, it's like $13.
Well, it is Mill Creek. Mill Creek is right. The budget releases. That's why. And I think they put out the Blu-ray back in 2018 as well, which I think may be out of print now in favor of this new release.
Probably.
Because this one's coming out. I'm assuming it's the same exact disc.
It is.
It's exactly what many of you may already have.
Again, amazing movie. Emil Hirsch in this is especially just magnetic. He's one of those people that you watch a performance and you are completely drawn in. Heath Ledger is a powerhouse on this. The story that goes with it is great. It is a really great capturing of an entire culture. It's one of those films that you can live vicariously through, and I love this one. Next up, Mortal Kombat Legends Cage Match is coming on 4K from WB Pictures on October 17th. This is going to have a bunch of special features. Just sharing the animation coming in 4K. That's a big deal. This one is interesting. So Friday the 13th is getting yet another release. This one is going to be the exact same 4K disc that they put out last year, I believe. This is coming on October 10th. And the really big deal about this is that they teamed up with Waxwork Records. And you could go to Waxwork Records right now and get the vinyl release for the score for the first film and the steelbook. And they will come to you all in one. They've got an art print that'll be coming with it, deluxe packaging, nice little bundle there for you. And that vinyl had been out of print for a while as well. So looks pretty good. But I'm sure most people have this.
Yeah, I mean, I've got the whole Shout Factory up to date series set of that. I mean, I know they've been working on a Friday the 13th movie, a new one, reboot, whatever the case may be.
And there's a series coming too.
Yeah, I know they've been working on that franchise, trying to jumpstart it again now for several years, but there's a whole bunch of rights issues going on with that franchise. That's just really made that very, very difficult. They seem to have worked everything out with the other franchises like Halloween and stuff like that. But we were just talking about The Exorcist. I don't know if you saw it. There's a new one on the horizon. There's a new one on the horizon.
Yep.
And they're doing stuff with that now. Nothing ever goes away. Everything just comes back.
That is a very great way to say that.
Yeah,
and it will continuously happen.
And I think Friday the 13th has to be one of the most re-released horror franchise on home media ever. I think all of them really are, all the main ones. I mean, I'm looking at my collection. I've got so many different editions of the Halloween movies. It's absurd at this point. Friday the 13th was the same way with the DVDs, the Blu-rays, the re-released on Blu-rays, and then now 4K is coming around.
This is already a 4K re-release.
Yeah, and this is a 4K re-release of a 4K. I do like the added vinyl though. Vinyl has made a big comeback, and I know there's a lot of enthusiasts in the same realm as we are with this.
Yep. I still think Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the first one, might have Friday the 13th beat for number of releases. And then I don't know if anybody can take the crown from the Evil Dead. I swear that movie
yeah.
has been released more times than people I've met in my life
Oh,
sometimes.
probably. Yeah, most definitely.
All right, moving right along. We talked about Nicolas Cage earlier. Sympathy for the Devil is his film from this year. This is coming out from RLJE on September 26th, and actually has some decent special features. It's even got an interview with the Cage Man himself.
Nice. Yeah, I believe this is coming out in theaters relatively soon.
Yes.
So this is a Blu-ray release even before the theatrical release.
Yep. It's I think it'll be limited theatrically sometime in August, and then this releases at the end of September. So it's really crazy when this is announced. So I have to imagine some people would stay home from the theater when they know that they can just buy it the following month.
That's the case right now, I think, in a lot of regards to new movies coming out. Probably a lot of the reasons why the box office got so much news about what was happening with in terms of disappointments with large budgeted films and stuff like that. When you've got movies that are going from theatrical premieres at like big red carpet events to being able to rent at home in 3 weeks,
Yeah.
there's gonna be some repercussions because of that.
Absolutely. Scream 3 is coming out on 4K on October 3rd in the US. It will have the steelbook available and this standard release. And no news on any new features or anything like that. And the big complaint that I saw from all the collectors is the first 2 steelbooks were black. Why is this one red? Come on.
Kills the continuity. Kills it. Kills the aesthetic on the shelf. If you have like an OCD about collecting and the way aesthetic things look, I definitely feel you. I definitely feel you. They also went with just the I believe it's the same cover artwork that they used on the DVD as well as the Blu-rays.
Yep.
Yeah, they didn't really do anything with that, which I guess that's the case. Yeah, I have a feeling they've already released 1 and 2, now 3, and I'm guessing Scream 4 will be next.
Well, here's the hard part. If I remember right, I don't think
yeah.
Scream 4 can come out on 4K unless they do a faux K where it's a fake 4K upgrade.
I was thinking, didn't Scream 4 come out from a different company than Scream 1, 2, and 3? Just because by the time Scream 4 had come out, I think it was a different rights holder. Maybe I'd have to look that up. Maybe I'm just talking out of turn.
It might be.
But that's something
Sibner
that
says
maybe.
Lionsgate has part 4.
Okay, that's what it is.
So yeah, I'm honestly not super hopeful about a Scream 4 steelbook. Stan is loving my new faux K that I just used.
Yeah, because I think Scream 1, 2, and 3 is coming out from Paramount.
Paramount, yeah.
And then Scream 4 was put out by, like I think you said, Lionsgate.
Yeah.
I'm not sure who's putting out. And actually, Scream 4, the Blu-ray came out from Star/Anchor Bay.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
And I believe that's because that was part of the divvying up of the Weinstein stuff with Miramax.
Yes, it was. Because I believe.
And Dimension, not just Miramax, but Dimension.
Well, Dimension, I think, was like the horror subset of Miramax,
yes.
wasn't it at the time? Yeah.
Yes.
This is going back to like 90s and 2000s distribution talk.
Hey, Dimension did some great horror titles.
Yes, they did. There's a ton of 90s Dimension horror films that are really just encapsulations of the time in which we grew up.
Which and Scream 3 is like the epitome of that too.
Yes, very much so.
Next up, I didn't even know that this was a thing. Kino Lorber on September 12th is releasing Final Cut, which is a remake of One Cut of the Dead, which I loved.
Yes, it is.
This is, let's see, do they say the country of origin? Is it France?
It's a French film. I know because I watched it last night.
Really? How is it?
It is kind of a shot-for-shot remake of One Cut of the Dead. It's directed by Michael Hazanavicius, who directed The Artist, the Best Picture winner from 2011. So if you're wondering what he's been up to, he directed this film. Berenice Bejo is in this film, who was in The Artist, and that was kind of her coming out film. And she kind of disappeared a bit over the last decade. Everyone who was involved with The Artist kind of disappeared over the last decade. Jean Dujardin, he showed up in The Wolf of Wall Street for like a scene or two. He was the Swiss banker. when Leonardo DiCaprio goes to set up the foreign
Right.
Swiss bank accounts. Almost knocked my water over. And so he was in that, and yeah, so Michael Hazanavicius directed this. When I saw that name, I'm like, that name sounds very familiar. And yes, it's him. And it's a French remake of One Cut of the Dead. So if you've seen One Cut of the Dead, you've seen this film. It's the same premise, it's the same structure. The twist is the same if you know this film. But it's done in French, and they kind of try to connect it a bit with One Cut of the Dead. I won't tell
Right.
you how, but they do. They try to do it. Um, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because I like One Cut of the Dead. So
So
it's
it
kind of just
captured
like
a lot of the same feelings pretty
yeah, it
well.
captured a lot of the same feelings of that, guerrilla filmmaking and all that kind of charm of that and whatnot, and the comedy as well, uh, and the unique structure of the film. But yeah,
Hmm.
that's the one thing that this one kind of took me by surprise this week.
Damn. Well, I might have to get that because I loved One Cut of the Dead. Interesting. This one will have a making of documentary and a trailer. Next up, we got our TerraVision Tuesday announcements this week, and the first one is the first UHD from TerraVision, and that is When the Screaming Starts from 2021. This is supposed to be pretty great. This is part of their deal with Screambox. They keep putting out some titles from Screambox. Supposedly, they got some more coming from that sort of partnership that they're doing. This is going to have a new HDR10 grade supervised by the director, 5.1 audio mix on the blue, packed with extras, including commentary with the director and Ed Hartland, deleted scenes, a making of doc, behind-the-scenes interviews from the set, a music video called Cannibal Death March, and then newly created captions. But the big thing I really wanted to highlight, because a lot of people gloss over this. First off, fairly cheap for a 4K release from a boutique with a slipcover, under $30 on release day. That's pretty great. But the bigger thing is when you are a subscriber to TerraVision, you're getting every title at the same price. So even though this is a 4K, you're getting the 4K at the exact same price that you're paying for all of the other Blu-rays as part of your subscription. So it's coming to you when you get the subscription. It's coming out basically at like $22 if you have the 10 film subscription. If you have the 50 film subscription, it's only $20. That's incredible.
You're throwing out a lot of math at me right now, which is that's a lot. There's a lot of math happening, but I understand what you're saying. Subscription services mean you spend less money per release. I think that's what you meant.
Yes, and it's amazing to see a boutique be able to do that in 2023 when so many people are struggling with money, so many people are budgeting what releases can I get, and when you can get a brand new boutique release on 4K when you're not a subscriber for less than $30 on release date, that's pretty great.
Yeah, and the movie is rather interesting as well. The movie itself, I was able to see, and it's very much in the same vein of the kind of horror mockumentary that you've seen crop up over the last several years. It reminded me a lot of something like we just talked about earlier, What We Do in the Shadows by Taika Waititi. But it
Yeah.
reminded me a lot more of Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. It reminded me of that film. I mean, it's dealing literally with a someone who's an aspiring serial killer, while Rise of Leslie Vernon is dealing with someone who's an established serial killer. This one is kind of like just figuring those things out and giving you like a behind the scenes mockumentary style of that process. It's interesting from that perspective, but I don't think there's anything in it that's too unsurprising. I mean, it has a lot of interesting things to say about, I think, fame or the want and need for fame, which we do, I guess, see in a lot of people who commit horrific crimes. We see this with school shootings, with people
Right.
writing manifestos, and people committing mass shootings at malls or churches or public events or things like that. We see that they have some type of motive as to why. And the film delves into that a little bit, which I think is where the more interesting aspects go, and really where the film ends up in over its course. But it's mostly just kind of a ridiculous comedic version of more serious ideas. So that may rub people a little the wrong way. You're watching and you're like, am I supposed to be laughing, or is this just really
Right.
messed up? Because it's a little too close to home to the way our reality is now, because people do act like this or think like this. And there's a specific real life connection that they make over and over again in the film, and I'm like, I don't know if that's appropriate to be making. Specifically, it's connecting with Charles Manson. I'll give that away, and I'm like, that's a really still a very hot button issue, because we just had the anniversary a few years ago, and of course we had Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the Quentin Tarantino film, which revisited all of that literally during the anniversary month at the same time, and then all of those things. But yeah, so this movie is rather interesting in its approach to all of these things.
I mean, so much I want to say. The Manson point, first of all, I just kind of went through that whole like weird existential thinking back on how recent that was, yet feels so far away, because I posted my interview with Richard Bamer, who was in West Side Story back in the day, and he was engaged to Sharon Tate. And just the fact that I was able to speak to somebody that was so personally enmeshed in that situation and was obviously affected by all that, like that's a big deal. The other reference, that you're alluding to, and it's referenced on the screen here, is Man Bites Dog, and that movie has a lot of that same feeling of like, is this meant to be funny? Because it's kind of like farcical, but also this feels gross. And once again, I will just put out into the ether, anybody, please release Man Bites Dog on 4K, because oh my gosh, that movie is an astonishing feat. And looking back on it in a 2023 lens, oh man.
I'm really surprised Criterion hasn't re-released that, at least on a Blu-ray. I know they released it on DVD many, many years ago, probably during the 2000s, and they haven't revisited yet. So I'm hoping that one day they do that.
Yeah, I've still got that Criterion DVD, and it looks pretty good because it's one of the later DVDs, but it's still, this is one that it deserves a little more attention in 2023. From TerraVision, the other thing that they're doing, which I think this is one of the most consumer-friendly things I've seen from a boutique in a while, they are releasing Love and Saucers. And now, for those of you that have followed TerraVision from the beginning, since they started their video side at least, they did release this when they were an OCN partner label. And this had, I think, 1,000 slipcovers or whatever from them. But then it was going out of print because they were leaving OCN. So they said, well, we want the film to be able to still be released. So they're releasing a version again, and you can buy the slipcover that you can you can buy the release with the slipcover, or you can just buy the slipcover by itself. And the big thing is a lot of people bought the film as it was going out of print from Vinegar Syndrome for $10. And now you can go in here and buy the slipcover for $6. So you can feel like you have the entire package. So nice. That's a really good deal for somebody that would want this.
That's collecting redemption right there. Yeah. It really is. And for those of you that have seen the movie, it's actually streaming right now, I think on Tubi, if memory serves. And I also watched it last night, a very unique documentary about a very unique individual. Ryan, have you seen the film?
Yeah, this one is wild.
Very much so. For those of you not in the know, this is a very short documentary. It's only like 67 minutes long, about a man who believes he has had alien encounters several times throughout his life, many of which have been sexual alien encounters. And he's very matter-of-fact about it, very straightforward.
He describes it.
Describes it in vivid detail, and also paints about it. And that's the way he's able to kind of process his life of dealing with these alien encounters. And he's very serious about it. It's a unique film, very unique film.
It is a unique film. And one of the things I will say, like, most people, and this is an odd week to talk about this, as our Congress is having alien and UFO hearings on the Capitol. Either way, most people would believe that this person's story is very fake. However, I actually really like that the director approached this as like very unbiased as possible. He didn't say you're wrong, you're crazy. He just basically just documented what the guy was saying, and it's up to you.
Yeah, it's very objective.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's very open and honest, and like I said, serious and straightforward. It's not played for laughs. It's not played to mock this man and whatever he's got going on, whether it be a mental health thing that, or maybe it's a traumatic thing that he's been living on through his life. That could be it. But the film really doesn't delve into those. It just kind of presents this person, presents him talking about this in a very matter of fact way.
Yep.
Yeah, he does make beautiful artwork, though. I do say that. His paintings are he's very talented artistically.
And if I remember right, this slipcover is one of his paintings.
Yes, I believe it is.
And by the way, lots of good special features if you don't have the original release. And this should be an identical disc, so don't feel like you need to buy everything all over again or anything. Audio commentary with the director and producer, Q&A with David Huggins himself, bunch of Zoom interviews, isolated soundtrack, all the same stuff that we had previously. Let's see. Stan says, totally disagree. There is no pushback on his delusional claims. Yes, that's what I was saying, is it's all just objective. It's just literally just putting what he says on a disc, basically. Midlife Media resubbed a TerrorVision for the next 50. Glad this one was optional. Doesn't look appealing at all to me. All right. Next one up. Okay, we already talked about that one. Another steelbook, and this one is very interesting. So they are releasing Best Buy exclusive on September 19th, 4K steelbook of Fall from last year. Now, the reason this is so interesting, and it's really hard to see this, but I'm going to zoom in here for everybody watching live. Under the little portion of the podium there, you see the word unrated. This is the first time in the US, not only that we are getting a 4K release, but also the unrated cut of this. And what makes it unrated is that the director owns like an AI company of some sort. And when they were releasing this film theatrically last year, they wanted it to be PG-13 rather than R. So they took this AI program and dubbed over the actors' cuss words and CGI'd over their mouths to make it look like they were saying words that were not cuss words to make it work theatrically. I've heard this movie is mostly not great. However, there's some good tension scenes in this. I don't see how this is a full-length film. This seems like it should have been an idea for a short film. But I'm very curious to see this release. And I do hate that we are getting the full film released less than like a year after the original release.
Understandable. I can say, having seen the film, they do stretch out this premise to the full feature length film. They get into what happened beforehand, how things got into the situation, all that kind of stuff. That's how they're able to really stretch that premise. I mean, the premise is these two women go up to the top of this tower and get stuck there, and they've got to figure out a way to get down. That's kind of that is the premise of the movie, and they stretch that idea. It's kind of, they stretch that idea to its fullest length, and it's a survival film. We talked about Frozen earlier. It's very much like that, except they're on top of this giant rusty tower.
I love this comment. Sibner says, this is just 47 meters down, but up.
I thought about that as well. That's the exact movie that popped into my head as well. It's like, you got, yeah. It's in the air versus under the sea. So which one are you more scared of, basically?
Kerry Mulligan, Fall was intense on the big screen. My fear of heights made it a unique and wild experience. See, and I'm still unsure if I have like a real fear of heights, because I've been up in a lot of high places, but I hate things that when I'm up high and things are feeling unsafe. Like I don't like ladders. So I'm wondering if this movie would really work on me.
I don't know if I don't know if that's the case. You know what I mean? I guess you would have to watch it and find out. As someone who is a bit of afraid of heights, like afraid of heights to the point where I can't go to the railing on the third level of a shopping mall, like level of fear, then it definitely worked on me. I'm also for some reason thinking of that movie Walk, that movie with
yes,
yeah, I'm thinking of that, which was
was that Joseph Gordon-Levitt?
Yeah, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. It was the director of Back to the Future. I don't know why I'm blanking on him.
Zemeckis.
Robert Zemeckis, I think, directed that. And I remember that was during the 3D days, so you could go see that movie in 3D. And it's about a real life man who walked the tightrope between the Twin Towers in New York. I think back in the 70s. Um, back when the towers obviously were up. And the documentary "Man on a Wire" is fantastic. For those of you who haven't seen that, it was on
Yeah.
Netflix for the longest time, but then they took that documentary and made it into a movie, similar to the way they did with Dogtown and Z Boys, and they turned that into Lords of Dogtown. It's the same
Yep.
type of tactic. But I remember, I remember when that movie came out, and just like they would purposely get those overhead shots of looking down
Yeah.
to the streets to make people feel like they were falling, and of course, it being in 3D at the time, they would do that as well. I remember the movie Everest,
Oh
the
yeah.
mountain climbing movie that was also during the whole 3D craze phase of the early to mid 2010s, I guess,
Yeah.
and late 2000s and whatnot. That was another one where it was played on that idea where you would see they put the camera so you could see down the mountain and it'd freak you out. But yeah, that's Fall is kind of similar.
I will happily check it out then. Next one, November 7th, Best Buy exclusive 4K Steelbook coming for American Graffiti. No news on any special features yet. You can pre-order this now. I'm very curious what everybody thinks of this art. I've not heard many reactions to this. I'm okay with it. I think it's not terrible.
Yeah, it's very pop. It's not pop artish. What is
No, it's
no? It's but I don't mind it. It's very. It's kind of like looks like a splash page of just a
yeah,
bunch of different things from the
almost like a
movie.
yearbook mural.
That's a mural. That's the word I was looking for. I for one am just glad this movie's getting a 4K re-release, similar to Uncle Buck. Came out at around the same time from Universal on Blu-ray with a bit of a lackluster Blu-ray. It's the George Lucas film that he did before Star Wars. It's very much inspired by his real life. Growing up in California and growing up during the 50s. I mean, it's a really great film. I've kind of love that movie, and I'm glad it's getting a 4K re-release. It's once again Universal doing a whole redemption arc for a lot of their early Blu-ray mishaps. It also star-studded cast in this. Richard Dreyfuss, Ron Howard, Harrison Ford is in this film in a small role. Yeah, it's a really awesome movie. Just a hangout teenage coming of age film.
Yeah, this is a good one. Obviously, lots of big names. I'm stoked it's getting a release. This one, we got lots of details coming on Natural Born Killers 4K from Shout Factory. Quietly, Best Buy put up an exclusive 4K Steelbook. Shout Factory is releasing this themselves in a just regular release from Shout Select, but this is just kind of out of nowhere, but it revealed some other details. So we found out it was a 3-disc release, and the 4K was on the director's cut only. The theatrical cut is only getting a Blu-ray. A lot of people getting upset about that, as they usually do about Shout Factory stuff. We did get some new special features on this, though. We got a new interview with editor Hank Corwin, new interview with the producer Clayton Townsend, new interview with the special makeup effects artist Gordon J. Smith, and then interview with cinematographer Robert Richardson, and then that is it. But the big thing too, this is, let's see, there was one more point. Both cuts of the film have the song "Burn" by 9 Inch Nails, which had been cut out previously. So looks to be the fullest release of this film that we've ever had.
Yeah, like you said, it's getting both cuts, which ironically I own this movie twice because they put out, I think, they put out one cut first, and then years later they put out the other cut, and so you had to buy it. And to be honest, I think the only difference between the cuts is a couple of seconds, isn't it? It's
Something
not
like that.
it's not something like absurdly traumatic or dramatic or life-changing or movie-altering film part of the film. It's just I think it was cut mostly to get the rating down, to get it to R, because of the way the MPAA is. You had to
Right.
cut out certain scenes, cut out some blood, cut out a few frames here and there just to appease them and get things down to a certain way. But yeah, this is a deluxe release as you could get of Natural Born Killers. I think done by the special features done by Justin Beam and Reverend Entertainment. So yeah, it's a stacked release.
One thing that people have asked, is it the same release from Shout Select on this? Yes, it's going to be identical. They've done this multiple times. Like they just did this with Hackers recently, and I don't understand why they're doing this. They announced their release, and then it's getting a special steelbook from Best Buy, and Shout Select isn't announcing anything. Best Buy, of course, is not announcing anything specifically. It just shows up, and people happen across the listing, and I'm very curious
why they
they're
don't
not
make
doing that.
why they don't make the specific distinction, saying telling us that it is the same release. I don't know why. Shout Factory has been doing that for years. I don't
Well,
know.
they don't even tell us that the release exists. That's the
Yeah,
weirdest
that's
thing.
another one. I mentioned this a long time ago on our podcast where back when Best Buy used to be more robust when it came to their movie sections, they would have a whole steelbook section. It would be steelbooks from Shout Factory, and it would be steelbook re-releases, remastered, that I had no idea existed. And I was just like, wow, I wish we knew that this happened, because they would put out Blu-ray releases, and then years later they would put out steelbook releases that would have remastered discs in them, but you didn't know that they were remastered because they didn't really advertise them that way. The one that's popping in my head right now is, I believe, Joe Dante's Piranha, the original Piranha.
Yep.
They had put out, and then they had put out the steelbook of Piranha, which I think is now out of print. The steelbook was a remastered version of the movie, and it looked a heck of a lot better. I don't know if they did the same thing with Rock and Roll High School, but they may have. It's so odd that they would do that.
So Sibner just looked up the details and said the cuts in Natural Born Killers is 4 minutes worth of footage, and they had to make 150 cuts to get it from NC-17 to R rating.
Wow, that's a lot.
That is a lot. Next up on the docket is a release of Kick-Ass 2 coming on 4K on September 12th. This is the cover for the standard 4K release. This is porting over a bunch of the archival extras, if not all of them. I believe it's all of them. I did not double check on the previous release, but it looks like all of them to me. And then at the same time, they are releasing this Best Buy exclusive 4K steelbook for it, which pretty much very formulaic for the film. It basically, I could have told you what this was going to look like before they even announced it. Yeah, looks like a decent release.
It is the 10th anniversary, I think, of the release of this film, or somewhere around there. Yeah, the movie came out in 2013, which
It is, yeah.
It's kind of blowing my mind a little bit because I saw this in the theater and it felt like yesterday, but in reality, it was 10 years ago. I remember this when this was released, and I remember people loved the first film. The first Kick-Ass was kind of one of those first gritty R-rated adaptations of an indie comic, because at that time we were getting just kind of inundated with the MCU was starting their thing, and of course DC was after. We were still getting the Nolan films really at around that time when it came to Batman, and then we got Kick-Ass I think around 2009, and people just loved that it was an R-rated, bloody, brutal action film. And of course afterward, they would continue to make those types of R-rated superhero films, and they've been successful. But Kick-Ass 2, I think, kind of gets forgotten about a bit. You know what I mean? Jim Carrey is in the film, and I thought he was great. I'll just say that.
Well, and that was what I was going to comment on. Is my big cultural touch mark on this release is Jim Carrey, when this was coming out, refused to do press for this because after he filmed it, he regretted taking part in the gun violence and was noticing all of the gun violence in the U.S. around that time. I just can't help but feel depressed knowing how much worse it's gotten in the last 10 years. And looking back on this now, I can't imagine how he feels considering how he felt then.
Yeah, we know that he's been very politically active online and in his life over the last several years. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's only gotten extremely, extremely worse.
Also, another very talented filmmaking painter, like we were just talking about.
Oh, yes.
Jim Carrey is very good at painting. Next up, we got a bunch of information about what is coming from Vinegar Syndrome this coming Tuesday, which is going to be a lot from what it sounds like. So they put out this big press release confirming that they were going to be working with Distribpix and their extensive catalog of close to 300 feature films that will be coming to home video, including countless never-on-disc titles, as well as classic exploitation films from genre masters like Michael and Roberta Finley, the Amaro brothers, Joe Sarno, Chuck Vincent, Radley Metzger, Ron Sullivan, and Sean Costello, among dozens more. Additionally, Distribpix's unprecedented archive of key 1960s and early 70s exploitation rarities, many of which have been completely unavailable since the VHS and early DVD era, will at least be making their return to disc, all newly restored and presented in the type of deluxe, collector-centric editions that both Distribpix and Vinegar Syndrome are known for creating. And then they say, while schedule specifics are still being worked out, Radley Metzger and Gerard Kikoin's The Tale of Tiffany Lust from 1981 will make a World 4K UHD and Blu-ray debut late this summer, which means probably it will be a September title. And then after that, they are also going to do Michael Finley's Notorious Flesh trilogy. That's being prepared for a Blu-ray release this coming fall in partnership with Something Weird Video. Additionally, the Command Cinema line, which has been distributed by Distribpix for the last several years, will also be joining the Distribpix and Vinegar Syndrome family, and will see both Blu-ray and 4K debuts of Cecil Howard's acclaimed erotica. So you've got a bunch of titles that were released previously by Command Cinema and Distribpix, all coming back to disc that were really hard to get for a long time, selling for like $100+. It was wild what some of these adult erotica titles were going for. You should be able to get those soon. I don't know if I'm saying this word right yet. I'm going to say it the way it looks like, but Melusine, which will serve as the flagship brand, will offer deluxe 4K and Blu-ray combo pack editions of some of the landmark works and hardcore theatrical features, with an emphasis on works by the genre's most acclaimed filmmakers. That's just part one. They wanted to continue. Quality X is the name that will pay homage to what was one of the most esteemed early home video distributors of erotic entertainment. That will offer single film Blu-ray editions of standout and hidden gem theatrical hardcore features from around the globe. Then Distribpix itself will become home to all things sexploitation, pulling from both Vinegar Syndrome and Distribpix's vast libraries, and ranging from the earliest nudie cuties all the way through the tail end of theatrical softcore. Releases will be single, double, and triple feature Blu-rays. Finally, Vinegar Syndrome's acclaimed hardcore feature branding, Peakorama, will continue to offer double feature Blu-rays of hardcore films in all genres. The union between the two of these will produce the widest and most diverse catalog of exploitation, sexploitation, classic hardcore features available on disc anywhere in the world. That's a lot.
That's a lot. That's a hell of a press release. It really is. I know a couple of months ago, or maybe not that long ago, who knows really how time works, we had heard from Vinegar Syndrome that they were kind of separating their Peakorama and their more erotic stuff, branching off into someplace else. And I guess this is the answer to that question, or answer to that speculation about what they were going to do, what their plans were. I know they were developing a whole separate site that they were supposed to go on to and whatnot, where you could buy them there, and it would be connected somehow to their Vinegar Syndrome site, so you didn't have to make two different purchases or whatnot, or however that was going to work. But now I guess we've gotten more information on how all of that is going to go in the foreseeable future.
And obviously, we're going to find out a lot more this coming Tuesday. It does sound like subscribers to Vinegar Syndrome will still get 50% off of all of these titles from this new website. And if you do buy from either site, they should combine together into one order. It all does seem a little more complex than it probably needs to be. But I'm willing to bet, and we speculated on this at the announcement originally, but there's probably some studio behind this that saw their homepage and didn't want their title next to, Hot and Saucy Pizza Girls or something like that. So
that very well could have been the case. I mean, as we've seen with Vinegar Syndrome, has put out some more mainstreamy type stuff. I mean, I just watched their VSU edition of Roadhouse recently, which is a beautiful edition. I that picture quality on that blows the previous Blu-rays out of the water like crazy, as well as the extra features and whatnot, and just the whole package in and of itself. But as they're getting into more kind of mainstream stuff, perhaps that was the case. You know what I mean? Maybe this is a better business decision in that regard for them. Either way, everyone still kind of has access to these releases. We just have to do a couple more steps to get there.
Exactly. A few more things left, and this is probably the most depressing thing that we're going to talk about all week. So where to even start with this? There was some rumors that started in Australia a couple days ago saying that Disney was pulling out of physical media in Australia. It was unsubstantiated, and then suddenly the post that originally dropped this was removed from Facebook. Then Bill from the Digital Bits went on to industry individuals, personnel behind the scenes, and confirmed with multiple industry distributor and retailer sources in the region that Walt Disney is indeed pulling out of the Australian market in terms of physical media. This follows similar moves in Asia, except for Japan, and Latin America, and the reason is apparently down to the gradual collapse of physical disc sales in the region, the growth of Disney Plus, and also the rise of global retailers like Amazon and Zavi. None of that will be of any comfort to disc fans in Australia, who will now have to pay a hefty shipping premium to import titles from outside the country. And Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is the last new release Disney title getting produced for Australia. And the other thing that they went on to detail is that older titles that are catalog titles for them may still be on sale, but when they run out of copies over there, they are likely not producing anything else for Australia.
That's going to turn the resale, the third-party market, into a frenzy when those things start disappearing from the shelves of those stores or from the online distributors in Australia. Yeah, it's depressing because of the overall impact it has and whatever precedent it might set in other areas. You know what I mean? Now it's just Australia, but what happens if in other places we've been hearing that this may be the case in South America as well? That's from in regards to Disney. What happens if it spreads out even more? You know what I mean? I had a feeling for years that Disney would have been one of the ones to start pulling back on physical media, and in a way they have. In a way, they very much have when it comes to even their more popular mainstream titles, their brand new stuff. They don't really market as much anymore. They don't really put as much effort into anymore on just a basic level of special features, or even distribution has been an issue for a while. Pricing also. I've had this issue with Disney for many, many years. They always were very expensive. Their new stuff and their catalog stuff was always very expensive. And obviously over time it hasn't really shifted from that. But this is a damn shame, because I know there's a lot of people in Australia who obviously are customers and collectors and buyers of Disney's products, and now it's going to become much more difficult for them to get their hands on these. Specifically since I'm pretty sure Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is coming out now. Like, they didn't give people any warning.
Next week, literally.
Yeah, literally next week. It's like, you couldn't have told people a little while ago, or even maybe told retailers so they could at least, get as much inventory in as they possibly can before the doors shut off and they don't have access to the inventory anymore. So yeah, it's a mess.
So there's a lot of thoughts around this. And first off, there's things that make this a bigger deal and less of a big deal than it sounds at, just dropping this information like this. So first off, this is a bigger deal because not only is it Disney, don't forget Disney also owns all of 20th Century Fox. So it includes all of those titles as well. Now, the other side, this is where it doesn't feel like as much of a big deal. The reason they're doing this is because people aren't buying the films. So there are a few people that are buying them, but supposedly it's such a low number that they've dropped everything to clearance prices. And when you look at prices in Australia, a lot of the new release titles are about $30 in Australian dollars, and they're down to $8 to $10 in clearance at your JB Hi-Fi. There's a few other bigger Australian stores that still carry them in person, but I can't even think of many of them right now. But they're selling so few that they're dropping them to clearance, and people still aren't buying them. So it's odd. Yes, the resale market will probably be higher, but also people just aren't buying them. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. One thing I did want to highlight, there was another article that came out today that Tony from Imprint Cast sent me earlier. This has some very specific numbers in here. And I had some people that commented on this that basically said, it's Australia. This can't happen in the US. No big deal. I want to point this out specifically. In 2006, Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest was the highest selling disc of the year. 14,476,924 discs. That's a lot. In 2012, 6 years later, the highest selling disc was Hunger Games. That sold 7,434,058 discs. So that's just about half. Then last year, 2022, the highest selling disc, highest selling DVD was Top Gun Maverick, and it sold 829,831. So you're talking less than a seventh of what it was selling just a decade prior. But even worse, so far in 2023, the highest selling DVD is Black Adam, and it has sold 74,353 discs so far. That's less than 10% of the highest selling from last year. If you think that we can't have this happen in the US, we are shrinking at a exponential rate.
Yeah, I mean, there's been radical changes globally over the last several years. I mean, we've all known this. I think there's also been radical changes in the way in which we consume entertainment over the last several years globally. And we're seeing, like you're just saying, the repercussions of that, even from a mainstream perspective.
Right.
We're talking about Disney here. Disney, one of the biggest companies ever to exist, ever on the planet, endless money, all this nonsense. If they're struggling to sell a product, could you imagine some of the other companies, trying to sell a product in certain areas, whether it be Australia, whether it be here, whether it be Europe, wherever the case may be? If Disney can't sell their brand, and they have one of the biggest, most powerful brands ever,
right,
it is going to be difficult. But it does lead to the fact there has been changes in the way we consume entertainment because we've shifted so much from the physical media format to the streaming format, to easier access via streaming, VOD, digital versions of films. All of those things have all factored into it, I would say, when it comes to why those numbers have shrunk dramatically over the years. That seems to be the case, and it's ever changing. I've been saying this over the last little while. I think the streaming bubble has been shrinking as well. I mean, we're seeing that now when it comes to just the way in which companies handle their streaming services, handle the way in which they're giving us their quote unquote content, which is not a favorable word for a lot of people to do, but it's the way in which they coined it. But their movies, their TV shows, all that kind of stuff. We're seeing a financial shift in the entertainment world when it comes to movies and TV, and this is just another part of it. I mean, it could happen here. You're right, Ryan. I mean, it could very much happen here, and it's probably happened here on a much smaller scale, and we haven't really noticed it. If you go to any brick and mortar store, I've been saying this now for forever, some of them have gotten rid of their movie sections. So we're seeing that already. The limited distribution of companies to retailers has already happened, and it's continuing to happen.
Well, and that aspect makes sense to me because Target can't make money on selling a Blu-ray. The cost of that has changed dramatically so much over the last, we'll say, 15 years, that when you saw a DVD on sale in Target in 2007, they would make money selling that. And nowadays we're talking pennies on what they're selling these Blu-rays and DVDs for. So it's not really worth it when consumers most of the time can go on Amazon and get it at their house in 2 or 3 days for less anyway. So most of them are doing that. So yes, Amazon cutting back, that makes perfect, or sorry, physical places like Target and Best Buy cutting back makes sense to me. This takes it to a completely different level though.
Yeah,
and
this racks it up to, like, gets closer to the origin problem. Like now like the main company is like taking away stuff. You know what I mean? Before it was kind of like the go-betweens, the middleman, the stores were taking them away, or stuff like that. Now it's hitting its source, and that's a bigger problem.
Right. And one thing that people forget about Disney in context with these conversations, Disney has always hated home video. They have never treated it with respect. I mean, they were one of the first companies to have the idea of a vault and just literally remove things for fun. If they
That was a
Go ahead.
marketing scheme.
Yeah.
That was such a marketing scheme because all of the movies that they said they were putting back in the vault back in the day, they put them out like another 10 times. Like, I remember 101 Dalmatians, the animated film, was supposed to go back into the vault. And then they put it out on what, Blu-ray twice, 4K, and
Yep.
then the et cetera, et cetera. It's like, no, it was a whole marketing scheme, but it got people.
Right. And the big thing with them hating home video is they want to be able to make money every time you watch one of their films, not just you buy it once and I mean, most of us, especially around our age, we would watch some of these Disney films literally 1,000 times at home. It's something where some of us have watched these films so many times that you could quote it word for word, and they didn't make money every time you watched it. So now their model, let's get those families to pay us for streaming every single month. So that way they're paying us every month for these films instead of just once. But then the worst part is that they are now showing us that they can pull something from Disney Plus, not have it be available anywhere, and it's literally just because of a tax write-off. It's all about money. They don't care about the films. This is
Right.
all about corporate greed.
Yeah, Warner Brothers set a really bad precedent by doing that recently. After the whole Discovery Plus Warner Brothers acquisition, merger, whatever the heck you want to call it, it's been a disaster, really. But once they started doing that, all the other companies are like, "Wait a minute, we can do that too. We can
Yep.
do that." And not only is it affecting getting a tax write off, you don't have to pay residuals to the creators, the directors,
They already
writers,
weren't. So
actors. They already now we're learning that they were already paying next to nothing anyways in
yep.
terms of residuals. And so and it all of the stuff that's happening right now, and I mean, it's a much larger conversation. We're learning why in which these companies were able to build up these streaming formats to be this gigantic global machine thing it is because they were paying everyone so little. So
Yep.
they were able to do so much and get away with so much. And now everything has kind of come back to hit them. You know what I mean? Where
Well, and
now
the
actors and
hard part,
writers
it's
have
not hitting them, it's hitting us still, no matter what.
right. I mean, it's hitting them in the sense like they've got to they you know what I mean? We know now. The veil has been kind of pulled back and we know that all of these writers and actors weren't getting paid what we thought they were getting paid. You know what I mean? Whenever time we heard money that um this movie or this TV show has 100 million streams in the first 24 hours. Now we know that that didn't mean that anyone was really getting paid for that,
Right.
where it was just kind of just a mirage. It's all kind of a song and dance, and you know what I mean. I guess that's what the entertainment business has kind of been built on. Um, or going all the way back to the circus. Wasn't it like P.T. Barnum said there was a sucker born every minute or something like
Yep.
that? You know what I mean? It's the same premise over and over again. History is cyclical when it comes to all of these things.
Important comment from Sibner here says they have their own exclusive Disney movie club. It makes no sense. Well, let's deflate that a little bit too. They're just moving up in size of countries, basically, because in October, Disney is eliminating the Disney Movie Club in Canada. The final orders can be made in September, and that is it. And I'm willing to bet that that'll be happening in the U.S. eventually. They are funneling everybody to Disney Plus or nothing, and even then, they'll control all of the media. They'll delete what they want to.
It started off with them editing things. You know what I mean? It started them off with them censoring certain cuts in different movies. I know Netflix started doing that a few years ago. I mean, there was another time when they were, and then Disney was like, "We're going to edit certain scenes." They edited certain cuts of certain animated films, certain live action films. The Daryl Hannah beach scene in Splash was a
Yep.
famous one where they digitally put a bikini on her and stuff like that. Um, yeah, it's a slippery slope, and we're now seeing that it's an avalanche. You know, we're seeing the repercussions of all these slippery slope things, and yeah, and it's gonna hit physical media, and obviously it's gonna hit Australia in the physical media department as well.
Again, this is a big deal and less of a big deal than people think, primarily because people weren't buying them already. The boutiques aren't going away there yet, but the big thing is if this goes away in the societal markets and nobody is buying physical media, that means there's no reason to sell Blu-ray players or 4K players, which means boutiques have nobody to play their items eventually. So it is a death knell that is continuing to come, and I don't think physical media itself will ever go away, but we are becoming survival of the fittest essentially for collectors, and there will be a time when no more players are being created, just like with VHSs. So it's difficult to find a good, like, really well made VCR that's working perfectly nowadays. Eventually that'll be the same for Blu-ray players and 4K players.
I think we're a ways away from that, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're reaching the point where also how much more are these big companies going to invest in furthering the technology?
Of course.
You know what I mean? We had an interview the other day, which we haven't posted yet for one of our episodes, but I asked someone, is 4K the last of the physical formats when it comes to home media? And I believe they said that it is. And I'm like, that makes sense. You know what I mean? I don't know how much further we can push the medium of home entertainment when it comes to all of its aspects, the players, like you said, the television panels and all that kind of stuff. What is the market? Does the market allow for that? You know what I mean? How many people are going to rebuy another format, going to rebuy another type of television and all that kind of stuff in their lifetimes? You know what I mean? As it is, many people have found alternate ways in which to consume movies and TV shows, laptops, tablets, phones, et cetera, et cetera. So, like, what is the future for just the home theater experience, essentially?
Exactly. Sibner is pointing out that other players can play Blu-rays and 4Ks like PlayStation and Xbox, and I will sadly point out in response to that while they can play the discs, they are nowhere near optimized for home video viewing of those discs. They are much lesser than the high quality 4K players that you can get from Sony, from LG, and some others. So it's not the most optimistic outlook, obviously. Let's get into some physical media, though, after we talk about the death nail. Dry Ground Burning from 2022 is coming on September 19th from Grasshopper Films. This one sounds pretty good, actually. It says, just released from prison, Leia returns home to the Brasilia favela of Sol Nascente and joins up with her half-sister, Kitara, the fearless leader of an all-female gang that steals and refines oil from underground pipes and sells gasoline to a clandestine network of motorcyclists. Living in constant opposition to Bolsonaro's fiercely authoritarian and militarized government, Qatar's women claim the streets for themselves as a declaration of radical political resistance on behalf of ex-cons and the oppressed. This one sounds pretty crazy.
It sounds really good. It came out in 2022. It is a more modern film. But yeah, I really want to check it out now.
Yeah, sounds good. And Grasshopper doesn't get enough love ever. This one, oh man. So this is coming with some actual drama. So October 17th, Cinedigm is releasing RoboDoc. That is finally finished. This is a documentary that is premiering on Screenbox in 4 different episodes starting on August 29th. This one, I believe, got a Kickstarter like 8.5 years ago. This is one that's been in the works for a long time. They couldn't even get Peter Weller for the longest time, and they finally got him. And it's been in development. People still haven't gotten discs, obviously, so they're like, "Am I ever going to get this release?" And it appears it's finally happening. If you want to check it out, this will be available starting in August on Screenbox, and then you can buy it in October on disc from Cinedigm themselves. And that's the same group that did the Pennywise documentary that came out last year, and then the Robert Englund documentary that just dropped. Yeah, should be pretty good. The Others is one that we talked about from Criterion last week. They are releasing The Others in the UK on October 2nd, and that is coming from Studio Canal. It does not appear that it will have any HDR, just like on the Criterion release. So not much of a difference.
Yeah, I'll say it's interesting that this drops so soon after the Criterion release. It's like usually it's the opposite. Usually Studio is that a Studio Canal release?
Yep.
Yeah, it's usually Studio Canal announces it and then it gets a Blu-ray release from Criterion. That happened with the Servant.
Yep.
That happened with the trial. But now I guess Criterion got ahead of them.
Yeah, and this one, a lot of people, because it got announced a week after the Criterion, are comparing the two cover arts. And I got to admit, I kind of like them both. Like, I love that the Criterion's is a minimalist thing. I really like the art here that they're using. However, I feel like the typeface on the actual title of the film is selling a different film
Yeah,
entirely.
yeah, I would say that's some more. That looks like an Omen type of title.
That or like a
Cover art.
Monsters movie from
Oh,
1973.
okay. All right. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Yeah, that doesn't in line itself up with the vibe of that movie.
Right. Little odd there, but I do like the art style on the background there. Next up is speaking of Criterion, we had announced recently that Janus Films was putting out a new line called Janus Contemporaries, and we finally got release dates and information for the first three titles. All three of these are coming on October 17th. They are all Blu-ray releases. The first one is The Innocent from last year, 2022. And a lot of people are saying this is like the best film of last year. I've not had a chance to see this one. Have you seen this one?
No, I wanted to watch it when it was announced. Was a couple of months ago or something like that. That Janus Films was putting the out these more contemporary films. But no, I know this is directed by Louis Garrel, the actor.
Yep.
But I really, really want to see. I think it may be streaming now on the Criterion Channel streaming service. Don't quote me on that.
Probably.
Actually, as I look, yeah, it is. As I look on the letterboxd for it, it is. So I think all of those announcements, I think all of them are now streaming on the Criterion Channel. At least these three that we're going to be talking about. But yeah, I really wanted to see this movie, but it wasn't streaming anywhere at the time.
Yeah, they should all be on Criterion because they're all going to be Janus films. So I would imagine they should be. So this is the first one. And the second one is No Bears from 2022 as well. Again, this is supposedly a great film. I've not been able to catch up with this one yet. This was done by Jafar Panahi. He's been carefully crafting self-reflexive works about artistic, personal, and political freedom for the past 3 decades, despite being banned from filmmaking by the Iranian government since 2010. In No Bears, completed shortly before his imprisonment in 2022, Panahi plays a fictionalized version of himself, a dissident filmmaker who relocates to a rural border town to direct a film remotely in nearby Turkey and finds himself embroiled in a local scandal. As he struggles to complete his feature, Panahi must confront the opposing poles of tradition and progress, city and country, belief and evidence, as well as the universal desire to reject oppression. This sounds really good too.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I've seen the film. I wasn't aware of the director and his obviously political associations and stuff like that, but it's a very politically heavy film. Obviously, very meta in its plot, and it's very, very good. Yeah, it's an Iranian director who has to remotely direct a film because he is legally not allowed to leave the country because of the suppressive and oppressive political system that exists in Iran. And the film very much is a political statement about that. It's
Right.
a very much so. So it's a very, very good film, very deeply thematic. Yeah, it's also streaming on the Criterion Channel as we've said. But yeah, it's really, really good.
And probably the most well-known of these three titles. EO is also coming out that same day. This one was directed by I never get this last name right. I'm going to try it. Jerzy Skolimowski. I think that's close. This is one that got a BFI release that a lot of people love. It's supposed to be great. I've not seen this yet, but I'm sure Andrew has.
I have. Yeah, EO by Jerzy Skolimowski. I believe, yeah, this was very much critically acclaimed last year.
Yes.
It ended up on a ton of people's favorite movie of the year list. I think mine as well. Yeah, it's I don't even know how to quite describe the film because it's a film that you just follow this donkey around and you just kind of fall in love with this donkey and his journey. It's very much one of those types of films. I compared it to kind of Steven Spielberg's War Horse. That's the only kind of readily mainstream thing I could compare it to. And you just see the life of this donkey and his journey that he goes on in this film. And and it's if you love animals, if you have an affinity towards the love of animals and stuff like that and affection, you'll connect with this film on a very deep personal level, and it may make you very emotional. It's a very emotional, heavy film, in my opinion. But
Nice.
it's also it's obviously it's stripped down and whatnot, and it's not so much about plot and characters. It's about a journey. It's about feelings. It's about all of these things, and it's very, very good. Made me want to watch the other films by this director, who apparently has been working for decades. Actually, I wasn't
Yeah.
aware of that.
And BFI also released, I think it was a double feature of his films when they released EO as well. So if you're looking for more from him, that is a good place to find it. And speaking of Janice, it is a good time to remind everybody, like Carrie Mulligan did in the chat, tomorrow, final 24 hours of the Barnes & Noble Criterion sale for July. It is not the entire month. It is just 4 weeks. It is over tomorrow. And then word is getting out that the Arrow sale at Barnes & Noble will be starting next Wednesday, I believe, the 2nd. And it looks like they did that because Arrow has had stuff on sale continuously, basically since February at some outlet almost the entire time. So they were waiting for the Camp Arrow sale to be over so that they could start at Barnes & Noble. Let's see. Caveman is here. He says, sorry I'm late. Please donkey punch the like button before you leave. That would be nice. Thank you, everybody. I'm real curious if they, in November, are going to discount these at Barnes & Noble, because these are for sale on the Criterion site, and the MSRP on these is $30. So if they're on sale, these may only be $15 at Barnes & Noble.
I am wondering also what type of packaging we will be getting for these. Will they be the Criterion, clear plastic cases with the booklet inside and stuff like that, or are these going to be more traditionally wrapped in standard Blu-ray cases and whatnot? I don't know how they're going to distinct between these and Criterion. Are these going to have a special name? I can't remember what the original press release was, so it may
Janus
have
Contemporaries.
Janus Contemporaries. So will it have that plastered on it? Will they get a logo and all that kind of stuff? I remember back when I first started going to the Criterion sale at Barnes & Noble back in 2011 was the first time I went. I remember it used to be Criterion and art house films.
Yep.
It used to be the sale. It was 50% off. So that's when I discovered a bunch of indie art house films that I had no idea ever existed. That's when I discovered like Sony Pictures Classics and that whole line at Sony. A lot of Pedro Almodovar at the time. A lot of that stuff was on DVD and Blu-rays were coming out. That was right around the time where it just all of his work was getting released and whatnot. But that's what it used to be. It would be nice if they would include these releases with that. Who really knows? I'm also curious what the extra features are going to be with these as well.
Well, they're showing for EO.
Oh, I didn't see that.
There's a making of, and then they've got an introduction to the 6 Sardinian donkeys who play EO in the film. And it's got a trailer. For No Bears, we got a new interview with the filmmaker, or Ramin Barani, about the director Jafar Panahi's work, and then Panahi Speaks from Prison featurette. And then on The Innocent, we get a Meet the Filmmaker, and a new interview with the director, and a trailer, and that is it. So not a ton, and that does kind of explain the less expensive price point there. But yeah. I mean, that also spurs the other big question: are these modern films? Are they all going to go to Janus Contemporaries? And is Criterion done with stuff like Triangle of Sadness or Marriage Story or The Irishman or something? Or could they all be Janus Contemporaries? Or is there some sort of bonus, like Janus had a hand in the actual production, so that's how they're doing it? There's just a lot of questions.
Yeah, what does that? Yeah, what is the acquisition distribution rights details like? Because Janus does, acquire films in the modern, indie film market. They do go to the sales and not the sales, the festivals where they buy the movies and whatnot and then distribute them. Yeah, I don't know how all of that is structured and set up. It also current distribution deals with Criterion. For example, you just mentioned Martin Scorsese. Will Killers of the Flower Moon get a Criterion release? Right. Wes Anderson's stuff, his new film that just came out, his films seem to always get Criterion releases, and they're modern. So I get maybe that deal is just built in. Maybe that deal is in perpetuity for as long as Wes Anderson keeps making movies. Speaking of which, they're like 3 films behind now on Criterion releases. So
That's true.
I need my Wes Anderson Criterion. I can't keep looking at my shelf and having an incomplete Wes Anderson section. So make it happen, Criterion.
Maybe they're going to start from the beginning and do them all in 4K now for you.
Oh man, that'd be. What's interesting is that I'm just thinking, does Wes Anderson's films need 4K releases? And I'm like, they're so richly artistically aesthetics that
if they did
probably
HDR
could.
properly, those would look amazing.
Yeah, the way his cinematography is just the way in which is all set up, especially his more recent stuff. Especially, yeah, his, Asteroid City was such a bright film in
Right.
contrast to the what was his previous film, The French Lieutenant?
The French Dispatch.
The French Dispatch, that's what it was. Especially in contrast to that, which I think was mostly in black and white. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that's going to be structured. If anything, this will lead to probably more independent films ending up on Blu-ray sooner, which would be nice.
Right. That, and obviously the big thing here is all 3 of those are international features. So
Yes.
it is one way that we're going to get more of those most likely. So anything to get some sort of recognition on those lesser known international features, I'm all about. We got one more film announcement, and then I've got one more thing to show after that. But this is October 24th. We were talking about Kino Lorber reissues earlier. They are doing it again for Black Sabbath, the Bava film from 1963. Now, this is interesting because this is not a 4K upgrade. This is not truly an upgrade in the restoration or anything like that. This is previously released, so you have an audio commentary on this by Tim Lucas. But this is coming out again, and they did quote on Facebook in saying, "We no longer have the rights to the Italian version. We have no interest in releasing this on 4K UHD. This is a re-release of our previous AIP version that we licensed from MGM. It is the same transfer, but it is encoded at a higher bit rate and on a dual-layered Blu-ray 50 disc, giving the feature 30 megabits or more per second, which is much better compression than what they had the first time. So it should look better than the previous release that was on a BD25 disc. The previous release also did not have English subtitles, and this one will. The subtitles alone is almost enough to get me to get this one."
Yes. It's interesting because this is a re-release of the same AIP version they put out in 2015, and I think they put out the Italian version in 2013.
Yes.
Which I guess they don't have the rights to anymore. So for those of you who want to pick that up, may want to do that sooner rather than later. And maybe it's part of their, buy it before it goes away sale that they constantly have all the time. But yeah, this is a very interesting re-release because there's not really an upgrade here other than the encoding being much better, the compression being much better. So therefore, the aesthetic of the quality of the video may in fact be better. So that's it. But no new special features, no really anything, Yeah. So if you already have it, what type of quandary are you stuck in?
Yeah, this is a very curious one. I'm wondering if they're going to do this for many other titles because, as we've talked about on here before, Kino prior to like 2018 or 2019, they were basically like a Mill Creek level boutique. They didn't.
Yeah, they weren't doing. One, they weren't putting out as much as they're putting out now, nor as high quality as they're putting out now. If you look at a lot of their earlier releases, they were kind of just putting the movies on Blu-ray and handing us the releases because they didn't have the financial backing, the capabilities, all that stuff to do their own remastering, to purchase remasterings, to do all the restoration work that they're doing now. They've stepped it up over the last 5 years, like transformed completely into something else.
Yeah, big thing too. Back then, most of their releases never had any special features, a trailer at most. But the biggest thing I really want to point out here, how delightful the transparency is here. It is very rare that you would have any company come out and say, "We are doing a re-release, and this is the reason why you would look at it and see it as a different release." That doesn't really happen with anyone else.
No, it doesn't. We often don't even get details about a brand new release, let alone a re-release of something they've already put out. and why it's different. And we just talked about mainstream stuff. I mean, so many mainstream films have just been re-released on the same exact disc since the late 2000s,
Yeah.
to the point where it's just nauseum now. And they don't even tell you. They just say, here's a new Photoshop cover art. Here's a new steelbook packaging. Here's a new whatever. And then
Yep.
they just hand it to us, and they don't even tell you that, yeah, it's the same one that's been on our shelves for a decade. It's the same thing. At least this one, at least Kino here is being open and being like, yeah, it's the same one. You're right. You're not missing out, you know? But
Exactly.
this is the reason why it's different. It's a little bit different. I also like that they're kind of open about, yeah, we don't have the rights to the old Italian one anymore either. I found that to be a little nice information.
Yeah, and again, people rarely get that sort of an answer.
Very true.
Nicomedi says it's a drag that the Italian version of Black Sabbath won't get a Region A release. It's just that much better, especially the telephone segment. And supposedly, a lot of the Bava titles have been going out of print. And I believe the last I heard is that the Bava, whoever has the rights, was like catching on that they were selling well. So they were charging way more than they were previously. So I'm kind of worried about the future of some of the Bava titles. And I'm surprised they got this. Obviously, they got this because it's an MGM title. But the other ones that are coming directly to who has all of the Bava titles, that might be a little more up in the air.
And also, this is the AIP cut, which is a bit different than the original Italian cut, as that
Right.
person mentioned. So it's maybe it's a little bit of a different distribution type of contract deal going on there. Like you were saying, dealing with like who owns the rights here in the US versus overseas and stuff
Right.
like that.
And it's worrying because we're seeing like Play On Pictures in Germany. They just did a 4K release of what did they do? They did Planet of the Vampires from Vava. And the odd thing is it got a 4K release. A lot of people happy with it, but they region locked the 4K. It's not supposed to be region locked, but it's one of like 10 discs in the world that have been region locked. So
Yeah, I'm getting kind of annoyed that that's starting to happen a little bit, and I hope it doesn't set a precedent for other releases. I mean, apparently Shout Factory accidentally did it. Accidentally?
they
No,
have
you
now
didn't.
done it to 3 different titles.
Yeah, once is an accident, 3 is a problem. 3 is a problem.
Especially when that's 30% of the entire world's mistakes, supposedly.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. Last thing to talk about, and Andrew, pardon the self-promotion here. I've mentioned on here a couple times that as part of my Patreon, I started creating a zine every month, and it's called the Physical Media Advocate, and I was trying to find a way to separate it. I'm going to be putting it on its own website soon, but I can get this to people now outside of Patreon if you're looking for it. The important parts, it is going to come out about the 15th of every single month. You can purchase that just through me by sending $6.50 over PayPal or Venmo, and I will email you the PDF of the entire thing. It's going to be on its website soon, so you won't have to go through that process. But for those that don't know, this is the cover art for the second edition. We did, obviously, the actual PDF looks much better than this, but Planet Mondo is doing the art for each of these every month going on. And the second edition that is out now that I'm just super stoked. This is really great. It's got a top 5 list from Fran from Radiance Films, talking about classic Hollywood comedies. There's artwork by Planet Mondo, like I said. There's an analytical essay about Fish and Cat from the Deaf Crocodile release of the Sharam Mokri box set that they did, and that's written by Zach Bryant from They Live by Film. And then there's a really fun physical media horoscope that Erica from Unsung Horrors wrote, and it's got all kinds of stuff in it. This is 10 full pages, like loaded with a lot of information, and there's a lot in here. A lot of people have been really, really happy with it. And then there's some other cool stuff coming. I got snippets of interviews that won't be anywhere else coming in there, film reviews from the community and industry professionals, some more analytical film essays, lists and recommendations from all kinds of people, trivia, games, contests. It's pretty cheap, but if you want it at the cheapest spot, getting it in the Patreon is still the best way to go. Either way, if you'd like it, send me an email at discconnectedmedia@gmail.com or contact me through any of the social media sites. I'll get back to you, and I will get it to you as soon as possible. All right. One more thing to share, and that's usually what is coming out next week, in case you forgot. And next week is yet another big week. We are getting Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Let's just talk about the awkwardness of discussing that after the Australian situation. Ferris Bueller's Day Off in 4K, Rio Bravo in 4K, East of Eden in 4K, the Nightbreed 4K release from Scream Factory, Cinderella 4K from Disney, those bastards, Two Guns on 4K, a re-release of The Big Lebowski in 4K, Two Guns, 4K Steelbook, Force of Evil from Kino, Going All the Way from Oscilloscope. The FX and FX2 double feature from Kino is getting re-released already. Invaluable from Synapse. Let's see. Dos Estaciones. I believe this is coming from Cinema Guild. A whole bunch of Dragon Ball Z stuff. And I think, yeah, that's it for next week. Anything big popping out for you that you're keen on for next week?
Well, in my classic movie loving heart, obviously Rio Bravo and East of Eden, which are part of the 100th anniversary celebration at Warner Brothers. The biggest thing to pay attention to those, like I said earlier, old habits die hard. They're only coming with the 4K discs and not the Blu-rays. And I believe the Blu-rays will be the ones that have all of the special features from the older releases, the old Blu-ray releases. So I think these are going to be missing some significant Blu-ray special features that you can only find now on the previous Blu-ray editions. And that really pisses me off because why not just put the Blu-rays in there? It's it's the same trend that they did when they were making the transition from DVD to Blu-ray. They would give you the Blu-ray DVD combos, and you would get the Blu-ray disc, and then you would get the DVD would come along with it. And then over time, they'd phase away the DVDs. You know what I mean? You'd only get the Blu-rays and the digital code. You know what I mean? And now it looks like they're doing that with 4Ks, where you're only getting 4Ks and the digital codes. The problem now is that you are going to be probably missing the special features that are on some of the Blu-ray editions, which is really frustrating when it comes to two historical films like Rio Bravo and East of Eden, especially East of Eden, which is one of only 3 films that James Dean was ever in or was ever starred in.
Right.
Baffling. Truly baffling. And I can understand doing it because of maybe cost reasons or pressing disc reasons, but it's not as if they're lowering the pricing for us as consumers, because they're not. You know what I mean? They're just taking stuff away and we're still having to pay the same amount. I mean, I hope that they're going to look fantastic on Blu-ray. I would hope that's the case, but what do? I have to keep my old Blu-rays now on the shelf along with these 4Ks. It's a whole big problem, I think, just as for collectors. And again, it shows that they don't really care about collectors. You know what I mean? They don't really care about giving us the complete package. They just care about giving us a product, which it's always been the case.
Thinking about it now, I'm not sure if I mentioned it earlier, but Warner is also doing the same thing for The Exorcist. In the UK, that release is a 5-disc release. In the US, it's a 4K disc. There is it's 2 4K discs. There is no Blu-ray coming with that. And so we're missing out on documentaries and such. We are only getting, I believe, a commentary and a couple like tiny featurettes.
Yeah, you're getting the bare minimum of what's available as opposed to the complete package. I mean, they did a lot of that when it came to Blu-ray releases as well. I remember specifically the John Ford film, Liberty Valance. When that Blu-ray came out, it had 0 special features. You had to get, I think this was Universal actually, you had to get the old Centennial Edition DVD edition if you wanted to get all the special features for Liberty Valance. And it's really unfortunate that it's carrying over once again, where you're having to have multiple editions in order to make these complete packages. I mean, it's really annoying. It's really, really annoying.
Yeah, supremely annoying. I don't really understand even the cost-cutting aspect of it. It can't really be affecting them that much. You're the studio. You're not licensing them in a way that is making you spend thousands of dollars or anything. And again, the same thing we talked about with The Exorcist. Why is it different releases in different regions when you're the studio.
Right.
I,
And if it's the case, why didn't you work out a deal where you would get a cut, some type of cut, some type of kickback or percentage of the sales or something like that? It's like it feels like there's just a lot of laziness going on at several different levels within these companies that like will probably fix a lot of their issues when it comes to their financial problems. It feels like there's just oversights being happening just for the sake of it. Yeah, it's really frustrating. I did want to make a correction. The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance Blu-ray was put out by Paramount.
mm,
And it had no special features whatsoever, and you had to get the DVD to kind of create your own to supplement it. It's a shame that that practice is still happening with the new format, which has plenty of room on the 4K discs to put more special features. It's not like you don't have the room on the discs to do it. It just seems
right.
like a laziness thing. It seems like a cost cutting thing. It seems like an oversight, a lack of caring, and stuff like that from mainstream studio, especially when it's their 100th anniversary. You know what I mean? They're not really pulling out all the stops. They feel like they're doing relative bare minimum work of some of these releases, in my opinion.
That, and we're seeing from the boutiques that it is possible to have a great restored 4K film on a disc with all of the special features on that disc. Second Sight has consistently been doing that this year, where every 4K disc has all of the special features, and because it's a 4K disc, it's region free. Everybody gets it and can watch the entirety of everything, which is life changing for some of these people that never bought a region free player. Now they have a 4K player. They can buy a Second Sight disc for a movie that they would never get that type of release in the States, and everybody wins.
Yeah, and if it's like a replication cost thing, take a page out of the boutique label and reduce the amount that you make. I mean, if you're already concerned with not selling a lot, why not reduce the amount you make? Therefore, you're cutting there and sell a smaller amount, and therefore you're cutting costs and you're balancing cutting costs and stuff like
Right.
that. I don't think they think of those things. I think they just have a standard amount of how many discs they make, and they just make them whether they're going to sell well or not. They
Yep.
don't really make those adjustments.
That, and they'll like continuously put out a 50 gig 4K disc and then say, well, we can't put the special features on here, so we're going to take out the Blu-ray disc. But then they don't update the 4K disc to a 100 gig disc that could hold all of the special features. You're spending less money and nobody else wins. You get all the money, the greed
Yeah.
shows, and everybody loses.
Yeah, it started with a lot of the 4K re-releases when they would come with the movie on the Blu-ray disc, but it would just be the old Blu-ray disc that they
Yes.
had put out a decade ago. And I'm like, you already remastered the movie. Like the movie, you got the elements. You just put them on a disc. No, they just want to put those extra discs that have been sitting around forever in the package for us to do what with. Once we have the 4K, what are we going to do with this extra disc with this old beat up transfer on it?
Right.
What are we going to do with this? Chances are we already have it at home. I mean, it's truly baffling in a lot of things.
It's true.
You're getting a lot out of me, Ryan. This is like a therapy session.
Good. I'm glad to have it. And we're going to end up on a positive note, because at the heart of all this, reminder to everybody that, especially for me, and I hope for all of you watching and listening, this is about the films. That's what is in the case, and that's what I have the passion for. Sure, I love a good slipcover just like anybody else, but if it doesn't have a film in it, I sure as hell don't want it. We tonight are talking about a really fun topic, and that is actors who have made the turn to direct a film or more than one film. And we're going to talk again. I make this clear every time, but these are not like what we think are the 5 best, but 5 of our favorites that made the turn from actor to director. And of course, there's always going to be special honorable mentions and all that afterwards. But is there something about this topic that is appealing to you, Andrew?
I think it's always fascinating to see actors or actresses have their careers in the movie industry in a specific way, in a specific role, and then decide that, you know what, I want to try to make the movie like myself. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Um And it's fascinating how it's been happening, I think, now for decades upon decades throughout the history of cinema, where a lot of actors and actresses have done that, going all the way from the silent era all the way through modern day, as we're seeing with our modern movie world. Yeah, I think it's rather interesting because sometimes you can have a great actor or great actress and try directing, and it just doesn't work because it's such a different different role. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Movie directing is a very daunting task, and not everyone can do it.
It's very true, and a lot of the ones that are on my list are, uh, I don't know why, but I tended to very modern films on this list. I think I only have, um, I have one even on my long list that was pre like I think one pre 2000, and that's it.
My
Uh,
mine's the complete opposite of yours,
I
where I've
figured.
got one movie from the '90s, and then the rest are all decades earlier. So it's going to be very, very different. Very different.
And I'm 99% sure that you're going to name my one, so I will just wait on that one, and I'll
I'm
just do
curious. I'm very curious.
I'll just do 5 new ones then. And what we're going to do is take turns naming some of these, go through why it was a big deal, and share. You know, for some of these they did many films. For some they only did one, and just thoughts on the film and go into some details. So, Andrew, you want to go first? You want me to go first?
You know what? You go first, just because I'm looking up something right now. So yeah,
You
you go
got it.
first.
My first one is probably going to be a little out of left field for a lot of people. Well, not even for a lot of people, just probably not one that I've talked about a lot, and people might be a little surprised. I really thought Bradley Cooper killed it with The Star Is Born. That movie is so well made. The chemistry in that film is palpable. The performances from Bradley Cooper with that crazy drawl that he has through that entire film was really, really well done. And obviously, that's the big thing, is that a lot of these are actors turned directors. That doesn't mean that they're acting in the film that they're directing either. But Bradley, I mean, really kind of ate up every scene he was in. Lady Gaga killed it in this movie. Sam Elliott, another kind of underappreciated actor in this movie, because he wasn't in this giant role. He was kind of on the small side of it. But A Star Is Born is a really good version of this film that's been released, what, 3 or 4 times now? Like multiple remakes?
It has. I actually just got this on Prime Day, which is the original A Star Is Born from the
Nice.
1930s. 1954 was the one with Judy Garland.
Yeah.
The one in the 1970s was Barbara Streisand and Chris Christopherson. And then I think you've had other films that have taken the same premise and then kind of utilized it. But then of course you got the one with Bradley Cooper. It's a directorial debut, the film
Yeah.
you're talking about, which is, I think what stunned me the most about that film is that it was his first time directing a film, and it was so well directed. It was
It,
just,
it,
yeah.
it's an astonishingly well directed film, especially when you start to break down scene by scene. Like they had to film things in arenas, they filmed things in dimly lit bars, they filmed like drunkard and drug riddled scenes. They filmed a lot of different types of emotions through this, and yeah, just an incredible movie throughout. And I really enjoyed it, especially because the musical aspect. I've liked Lady Gaga since she made her appearance on the scene back in what, 2008 or 7 or whatever it was,
Mm,
and I've just always appreciated her stuff. And then Bradley Cooper again just sort of killed it in this role. He was incredible.
yeah, entirely agree. My picks are going to be way different than yours. I'm just thinking about that.
That's why I
Yeah.
skewed towards my end. Yes.
Yeah. So, it's completely shifting gears entirely. I'm gonna go with Roberto Benigni's "Life Is Beautiful."
Ah, good pick.
What an astonishing work by an actor. A film that is incredibly timeless. I mean, this movie came out in 1997, I believe. We're talking, oh goodness, many years ago now. Over about 25 years ago, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And it's, of course, it's set during, I believe, like, set during World War II, dealing with the Holocaust, but that's not really its main focus. Its main focus is about Roberto Benigni's character, him meeting his wife, them having a child, and them navigating that horrifically toxic world in a somewhat positive way.
Yep.
But of course, it's literally hell on earth, and trying to survive that, and but having the Roberto Benigni childlike aspect of it, and just the movie is just will gut wrench your heart out, I think, at the end of the film, and it's a beautiful, beautiful film. I believe it won several Oscars. Yeah, it had at least a few nominations for best foreign language film. I think for Roberto Benigni won for best actor of that time, and it's very rare that an actor in a foreign film will win the Oscar for best actor. Very rare. Can't remember the last time that's happened.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful film. And unfortunately, Roberto Benigni's directorial career really didn't last too long after that. He directed, I think one of his passion projects was Pinocchio in 2002, and it's notoriously just hammered as one of the worst films of all time. So he's never
Yep.
really. I think he directed one film after that, but it just his career kind of dissipated a bit. But he's still around, but he's a wonderful, wonderful actor. I remember him being in Down by Law, the Jim Jarmusch film. Him being in Down by Law was my introduction to him, and he was great in that film as an actor. But he did a directorial turn here, and this is just an incredibly powerful, beautiful, beautiful film in all of its aspects. I'm surprised this hasn't gotten a nice deluxe Blu-ray release or something.
Yeah,
for it,
it's
you know what
about
I mean?
time.
Because it's an important film, and it's about time. And I think this is an old Lionsgate release.
That could be. Yeah.
Yeah, old Lionsgate. Oh, Miramax. So who knows where those rights are?
Unfortunately,
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, this is. I saw this very young. I think I was 10 years old when this released, and I remember Benigni winning the best actor Oscar, and his reaction burned into my memories of him climbing over the seats going forward. And that's what you just mentioned is the fact that so many foreign language or foreign actors hardly ever win for best actor. It was so surprising to him that that childlike sentiment came out in his reaction to winning, and it just continued that year-long like emotional resonance of this film through the Oscar ceremony. And that will be one of my favorite Oscar moments ever.
Yeah, you can probably look up the clip on YouTube right now. It probably has millions of views. Yeah, it's one of those Oscar timeless moments. I think they show it in every Oscar montage that they ever try to create. At least they should.
Good stuff. All right. My next one, I actually went and chose this as sort of a timely pick because of us talking about Lords of Dogtown tonight, and also kind of awkward because the director is seen as sort of problematic at the moment because everybody's hammering on him. Jonah Hill's mid-90s. I grew up in Southern California in the mid-90s, and being a person of that age around that time, something about skate culture roped me in. I wanted to be just this massive skater, and I don't know why. I was a very awkward, clumsy person with giant feet, and I was never going to be able to be a skater. But something about Jonah Hill's mid-90s captured the exact culture so spot on. The language, I've never seen the language reproduced so accurately that I felt like that somebody was playing my memories. It was so odd how perfect it was. Very well acted. All of the kid actors in this are just astonishing. Really great story. The directing in this is pretty damn good, and I believe this was his debut as a director as well.
It was.
This is a really, really good movie.
Yeah, I was astonished by its authenticity. I believe Jonah Hill he grew up in that time frame.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Similar to us. I mean, I grew up on the complete opposite coast of you, and still was able to resonate with the film because of how authentic it was in all of its shapes and forms. I mean, growing up in the 90s, it's tough to describe to people just how unique it was, and just how un-PC it was. If you thought political correctness was an issue now in the world, in the 90s, man, that wasn't a thing.
Nobody
the way
cared.
and I'm bringing that up because the way in which the kids talked, I know everybody was so like taken aback by it when the movie came out, and I'm like, no, that's the way they talked at the time.
Yep.
It was a lot of homophobia, misogyny, sexism, racism, all of that was very much part of the lexicon and the culture of being a teenager in the 90s. As horrific as it is and how bad as it is, it's very much part of it. And if you kind of wonder why our world today is filled with so many of those things, a lot of people grew up in that type of environment. You know what I mean? It's the building blocks of your life, or really your teenage years. For the most part, for a lot of people, really, some people never grow past their teenage years, and the
Yep.
movie was a very good kind of coming of age film in that regard. Yeah, it's a film that I kind of wish I owned, but I don't have it. But I saw it when it came out. Uh, but another film that's kind of in that regard, but a completely different era, but dealing with a lot of specific things in that era, which are very contemporary, is my pick. Is Easy Rider, Dennis Hopper. I've got this. If you notice, this is a thin pack here because this is part of the BBS box set put out
Yeah.
by Criterion. And I've had this whole box set for many, many years, and it's just all of these films from that America Lost and Found, the BBS story, which I've gone back to so many times in references to stuff on our podcast and just in general, because it has a wealth of information. Just
Incredible
teaches
box
you
set.
everything you need to know about that era of cinema, of the whole BBS and the indie underground realm. But if you heard of the film Easy Rider, it's starring Dennis Hopper, of course, but also Jack Nicholson is in the film as well as Peter Fonda. It's a film that is very much about the culture of the time. This, you know, the hippie existential freedom, this search for something, but you're not quite sure what it is. This want and need for freedom, but there's a counterculture also going on at the time. But the ending of this film is so incredibly powerful and so incredibly telling and so incredibly modern in terms of what it's saying about America and its constant need of oppression and not being able to understand that other people can be different within our society and culture, and that still be a normal and positive thing.
Right.
It's really contemporary in that regard with all of the political discussions we have now. But yeah, this is part of that box, and I know this has been um, released in several formats over the years. I know Sony put out a Blu-ray of this before this even came out. But yeah, it's a all-time classic in my opinion, and shot very guerrilla style, very unpolished in its regard. And that's part of the charm of the 70s cinema, even though it came out in 1969. It's kind of a precursor to that grit of
Definitely.
the 70s.
Funny enough, I was waffling on some Dennis Hopper choices for a while because I I've talked about Out of the Blue so many times over the last year that people are probably tired of me bringing up that title. But he directed the hell out of that movie. He did great on Easy Rider. He has impacted so many damn films over the years. It is somebody that if you have a blind spot for Dennis Hopper, it's one that you should probably rectify because he's across so many genres and so many eras of filmmaking and somehow singular across all of them. He is somebody that you can find an appreciation for in a way that will blow your mind if you've never really dove in.
Yeah, he was around for so many different, you know, uh, eras of culture, and he seemed to touch on a lot of it. Um, yeah, I mean, we just talked about James Dean in East of Eden. He was in Rebel Without a Cause in a very small role. Um, yeah, it's. I remember when he passed away, and I wasn't even a big. I didn't really know a lot of his work at the time, but I did feel a great sadness for his loss. Because he was still working too
Yeah.
at that age. And he passed away relatively young. You know, I mean, it's just a damn shame because I feel like he would have done a lot of interesting things in the more modern age of filmmaking and stuff. But I'm glad that his work's getting really, like I said earlier, reappraised and
Right.
reappreciated.
Next one is going to be a mighty big change from Dennis Hopper. And for me, this one I picked because it's a mighty big change for the actor turned director. I was astonished to see the output by John Krasinski in A Quiet Place. This is, and you know, we talked about Emily Blunt earlier as we were talking about the Imprint titles. Emily Blunt elevates this story just from this tension filled, what almost feels like it could have been a Netflix setup for a movie because basically the same thing was done for Bird Box. Uh, what we have here is the same thing but with sound, and it's done in such a wonderfully tense way from somebody that was always known as a comedic actor. And there's not very many funny moments in this, but he owns it entirely. And then beyond that, he even chooses to kill himself off. Like, he did so well with this film that I was just beyond ecstatic to see somebody from The Office go into a horror movie made with his wife, and it just captured this moment in the zeitgeist that everybody seemed to see A Quiet Place. And I don't know that I've ever heard anybody give like a bad review of the film. It's so well made.
I completely agree. I remember seeing it in a packed theater on a late night screening, and people were visibly and just audibly reacting to the film. It's a film that, once again, I think it's a first time directorial
Yep.
thing for John Krasinski. And once again, so impressed by his technical prowess, by his way in which he set up tension, the way in which was able to hold that tension and stretch it to its, heart pounding degree, its pulse pounding degree, and really make you invested in the story as well, and taking that premise and building on it, and kind of dropping us in this post-apocalyptic world and being able to develop a story within it was truly, I think, astonishing. And to be honest, I actually like the sequel as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, which he also directed. I don't believe he's directing the third film, but
No.
he did direct the second one. It's really good film. Solid modern horror.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, it is my turn. And now we're going back even further than 1969. We are going back to 1955 with The Night of the Hunter, which
that was my one pick.
Okay, it is. I didn't know that you had it on your list. This is quite honestly one of my favorite films of all time that I think I've brought up in every conversation I've ever had about movies. Because it's a film, once you've seen it, I can't help but tell people that it exists. I can't help but tell people that it's directed by Charles Lawton, and it's the only film he ever directed, because when it came out, it was critically panned and not well liked and by audiences. So he was never given an opportunity to direct another film, or just didn't want to, because once it got received so negatively, and it's become one of just a staple of, I think, film schools and cinephiles and everybody. It's a film starring the great Robert Mitchum. Shelley Winters is in this film. It's a film just deeply entrenched in philosophical themes, theological themes, dealing with morality of good and evil, and the constant battle that is waged all of the time throughout humanity between the two. Robert Mitchum is on another level of frightening in this film, because he's able to bewitch everyone in this film to thinking he's good, but you can tell he's pure evil. You know what I mean? And you see that today with people. You see con artists in the political world and in entertainment and just everyday life. You see people who pretend to be something they are not, and people are constantly fooled by it. But there are always those people who can tell. They can tell the real people from the fake people. And in this film, it happens to be children. The innocence of children opens their eyes to this terrible human being. Shot beautifully in black and white. There is a 4K UHD edition which just came out from Kino, which apparently looks amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of just want to get it just because I'm just a big fan of the movie, but I don't think it has the same special features package as the Criterion. Because I've had this Criterion, I think, came out in 2010, maybe around that time. And it's something that's been in my collection ever since. It's one of the earliest Criterions I ever bought on Blu-ray. And yeah, I love this movie so damn much. It's something I revisit very often. Recommend it to everyone.
This is an astonishing movie. Robert Mitchum personifies like the evil religious con man in a way that no other film will likely ever be able to capture again. There's some seriously sinister shots in this film that will burn into your like visage if you've never seen it before. The car underwater scene alone is enough to make you shriek the first time you see it. And it's so well acted. The storytelling is so on point, and this is one of those films that it doesn't waste a single moment on screen, and there's nothing they could have added to it that would have made the story better. This is, in that regard, a very perfect film. You can't take anything away. You can't add anything to it. This is concise.
Yeah, very, like as you were saying, yeah, 93 minutes and not a moment is wasted on anything in it. It's just scene after scene is just resonating deeply, deeply amazing stuff. Um, Truly an all-time film. I mean, I know a lot of people don't like to say that any film is perfect or anything like that, but I think there are true few perfect films
Yes.
in all of cinema. I think this is one of them.
Glad we agree there. Next one is probably one that a lot of people don't go to because he's not even really well known for directing these films. But I'm going to go with a classic and choose Danny DeVito directing both Death to Smoochie and Matilda. And I talked about Death to Smoochie on here just a couple episodes ago, so I won't really harp on that one too much. Brilliant film. I think it's my favorite of his films, but really want to hit on Matilda here because Matilda is a film that grabbed a culture in a time of the 90s where so many people were innocent and really giving into this feeling that the baby boomer and Gen X generations above us were trying to prepare us for like this perfect lifestyle. You go to college, you get a degree, you have 2 kids, and you'll have this wonderful house and go on vacation 3 times a year, and life will be great. And Matilda really gives validation to so many people that did not have that great lifestyle. So many people are raised in a situation that is negligent or narcissistic or stuck in a situation that they can't simply escape because of the means in their household, whether that be due to poverty or due to location. A lot of people never harp on that either. If you're stuck in a small town, it's so difficult to escape. Matilda captures all of it beautifully. And what is so harrowing now is that we've learned that Danny DeVito not only did that for a generation through this film, but he did it for the star of the movie and basically cared for this girl through the entire thing and really has cared for her since then. I am astonished to see that we got amazing performances out of this. We got this story that we can look back on that was made in 1996, and it's based on a Roald Dahl novel, obviously, but the way that Mara Wilson plays Matilda is brilliant. She's amazing in this, acts wonderfully. Danny DeVito is there in the film and plays this skeezy little con man like we were just talking about, and he's great. But this movie is just through and through like one of the last remembrances of the innocent time, because shortly after this, everybody had the Y2K crash. 9/11 happened, the recession, so many things that happened. And ever since 2001, this generation has had countless things go back and forth about just really nasty, life-shattering experiences. There's so many traumatic events that have happened that it seems like other generations just kind of didn't have to face these big of things all the time.
Very interesting kind of extrapolation of that. Yeah, and there's a whole thing where our generation tends to hold on to a lot of nostalgia for things of when we were children. You know what I mean? There's a lot of that, and you kind of wonder why, because it's kind of probably the last time that you felt really safe. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I can't press this upon people enough who didn't grow up during, our similar generations, but 9/11 was a life altering event in many of its aspects, but it was a worldwide cultural changing event. There's pre 9/11 and post 9/11. That's the reason why that term exists. And having grown up being in, I think I was in 8th grade when that occurred in 2001, and being at that age, I mean, you're right at that pivotal moment where, adulthood's is in a few years, but the childhood is slowly dissipating, and those things are happening. But it's very interesting how a lot of people have a kind of hold on to the things of their childhood and things like that, and that makes a lot of sense if you dealt with a lot of traumatic things, as you kind of mentioned. that our world has been incredibly, constantly chaotic for the last 22 years, in many of its ways. And you need some comfort. And the comfort that we kind of grasp onto is stuff from when we were children. Makes sense. Makes sense.
Very
Um, moving on to something that is a little bit older. Once again, I think I'm going in reverse time wise. Is coincidentally a film from 1940. So I went from 1955 to 1940. Is The Great Dictator, directed by Charlie Chaplin.
nice.
Um, uh, an anti-fascist, anti-Nazi, anti-totalitarian, anti-tyranny, satirical comedy from 1940 from one of the greatest comedic actors of our time in Charlie Chaplin. Um, I found this film to be so incredibly bold. To make this film in 1940 during the height, or even in the late 1930s, during the rise of all of these things that are happening, is truly, truly fascinating. I kind of kindred spirit this film with Kubrick's Doctor Strangelove, or How I Learned to Love the Bomb, in the sense that Kubrick made that during the Cold War. He made a film satirizing the Cold War during the Cold War. In a way, Charlie Chaplin was doing something similar, but with anti-fascism and all that kind of stuff. And shocking to no one, all of the stuff that he was satirizing in this film, the grand speech he has at the end of this film, is as true as it was in 1940 as it is now. Films, I'll say this again, films are a reflection of the society in which they are made in many of their aspects, in many of their times. And sometimes those times don't really change that much, or they go
Right.
away and they return. And we see that now with certain rise of political fascisms, rise of neo-Nazis, rise of oppression, suppression, the rise of tyranny, and all that kind of stuff that has reemerged in our society, in our culture, as all was all talked about in this film from 1940. And that's what I really think is the brilliance of this film, the staying power of it. And just Charlie Chaplin doing some of his finest work. I know a lot of his earlier films are probably more endearing to people, but this one has always stuck with me.
Yeah.
I mean, Modern Times is brilliant, and all that kind of stuff. Gold Rush is also brilliant, but this film really hits hard today if you rewatch it because it's so contemporary in its aspects. Yeah, I've always loved this film.
The monologue speech scene or whatever alone is enough for people to warrant watching the entire film, and it's one of those that will be timeless, and it's one of the reasons why, like, the censorship aspects that we're facing across the country right now is so terrifying to me, because
Mm,
there are certain things that if they actually get erased, like the amount of times that this country has been slapped in its own face through the whole, if you if you repeat history, or if you forget history, you're doomed to repeat it, or however it goes. We're about to do that right now. Like, the amount
mm.
of times that we are seeing news stories about literal people carrying Nazi flags, strapped up next to some fence in Florida. It's appalling. It's 2023. Like,
Mm.
come on.
Yeah, I've been discovering, as a going back into history of cinema and history of stuff, and a lot of the films that were made, during the 30s, during the 40s, a lot of the, the anti-Nazi films that were made while we were at war are all appropriately contemporary. And it's just
Right.
like, how far have we come as a society? I mean, like I said, films are kind of commenting on us, and we're not really learning from any of those commentaries. We're just kind of repeating them. It's yeah. I think films are best when they're commenting on things going on, but they're even better if you can still take from those commentaries and learn from them. You know what I mean? Film is kind of constant in that regard. I mean, granted, it is, it's an entertainment money making medium in many of its aspects, but it is also a form of artistic expression and political expression and thematic expression and all of those things. That's why I think The Great Dictator kind of, it has so much to say, and it's warning us about things as well, as you mentioned in that speech. It's warning us, and we haven't learned in 80 years. It's fascinating how that works. But what's your next pick?
My next pick. I was waffling on a couple here, and I'm gonna go one that I've not talked about much on this channel, and it's another modern one, but I feel like this one deserves a little more respect because obviously a lot of people will disparage the MCU just for being comic book films and modern and all that stuff. But like the grandfather of a lot of this, it doesn't just lie in the feig of it all. I got to bring up Jean Favreau. This guy, playing tiny roles on Friends, playing in Made years ago that he also directed, showing up in the most random of places in the late '90s, to directing what many would say is the best Christmas film of all time in Elf. But my favorite from Jon Favreau is actually Chef. I think 2014 Chef is one of the most positive, wholesome family films of the last 30 years that is so overlooked by most people. And I don't really know why. It's got a pretty damn good cast. It's one of the best food movies of all time. It's done in such a way that perfectly encapsulates like the way that they are in this food truck. It's beautifully shot. It looks incredible. Obviously, Favreau has some bigger titles that hit a lot of people, but for some reason, when this came out, man, I attached to this movie so hard. And I'm a fat man, and food is great, but everything about this, you could tell he was just passionate about every aspect of this film. You could feel his personality in every scene, and it was actually this really great, engaging story. And maybe the best part to me is it was about a divorced couple where the father was not this bumbling idiot that was a terrible father. They did not have a strained relationship after the divorce, and it was just a real story about people that can live not together, but live in a life where they interact with each other and not just hate each other. They can have these actual relationships and be positive for this child. And it was just so much fun to watch. I love Chef.
I agree. I actually was looking at my Jon Favreau section last night in contemplation of making this list, and I was looking at it, and Chef is up there. It's actually the most recent of his films that I have. I find that when I'm troubled in life, I like to go and comb my collection just for no apparent reason, other than the fact that it comforts me.
Yeah.
But Chef was there, and I still look at my DVD of Made on the shelf, and I'm like, when's this coming out on Blu-ray? Damn it!
Yep.
But I say that every time. But Chef, I saw it in the theater back in 2014. It was such a surprise. And I think a lot of the draw to that film was Jon Favreau. But what I got from it is how, just like you're saying, wholesome, but very well made, genuine, authentic. At the heart and soul of that film is a relationship between father and son, a reconnection, a road trip film, traveling in a food truck across the country and utilizing social media to sell Cuban sandwiches and stuff like that. And it's so fascinating. It's so fascinating. It's such a great, underrated film that I don't think a lot of people know of. Because when they think Jon Favreau, they think, of course, Iron Man 2, and then his role in the Spider-Man films. But after that kind of MCU dust settled, I think for him, he went back to his roots. You know what I mean? And making indie cinema, and it's really just a genuinely very beautiful film, I think. Yeah, I recommend that for everyone. Also, it'll make you hungry. I think about it and I get hungry, man. I had never had I think I brought it up on our podcast. I had never had a Cuban sandwich until I saw that movie. And then I just wanted them after that constantly. And a lot of the other dishes that he makes in there. I think about the grilled cheese that he makes in that film with like a bunch of different grilled cheese. It's the cheesiest looking one you've ever seen in a movie. I mean, for those of you who are lactose intolerant, it's your worst nightmare. But for those of you who aren't, it's amazing. And then there's a pasta dish he makes for Scarlett Johansson, which I know you can get the dish online. He also spun it off and made a whole Netflix like cooking show about it as well, which was him cooking with his friends, who happen to be also celebrities. So
of course
it is. But yeah, damn good film and Chef. For me, last film here, for those of you who listen to my podcast, Chasing Labels, or Stephen and I's podcast, Chasing Labels, know of my affinity and love for everything and anything Orson Welles related. So of course I chose Citizen Kane. I got the 4K UHD edition here, put out by Criterion. I've owned it on Blu-ray. I think was the first time I owned it. It's a big deluxe edition, which I've done a review for on my channel. I think one of the longest review videos I ever did on my channel was an Orson Welles movie collection spotlight, I called them, which I went through all the films in my collection of his, and it was like 40 something minutes long, and the raw footage for that ended up being like over an hour, and I remember I had to cut down like 20 minutes out of it. And to this day I have never edited anything that long, and then I refuse to do it now. But that's probably why I have Steven do it. I've got PTSD from having to edit all that stuff. But Citizen Kane, it was a tough choice because I didn't know if it counted, because this was the first film I think he had ever directed, or at least the first one of note. He had probably done some stuff beforehand, but this is technically his original, first film as a young man director, this prodigy, and it's about this fictitious character based off of a real life character who is this newspaper mogul, and it's a biopic of his entire life, his larger than life of Charles Foster Kane, and it's told in a way which I don't think a lot of films were told at the time, in flashback form. You get the end of his life first, and then you're seeing it backwards, or you're jumping around to different parts of his life, which is something that's utilized today, but it wasn't really utilized back in 1941 when this came out. Beautiful cinematography done by Greg Tolan. The first time like deep focus was really ever utilized in a film, just trying things out in terms of angles that ended up becoming staples of cinematography and filmmaking for generations to come. Truly a unique generational film. I watch this like every year, usually around my birthday time. But Criterion put out a hefty like 4-disc edition. I know the packaging is a little controversial to many. They went a little overboard when it came to their elaboration, or trying to make it as unique as they could with all these fold outs and stuff. But it's one of my favorite films of all time. It's one that I revisit all the time. It's kind of a sad story of a very interesting character, I think. Someone who is kind of the enemy of his own destruction, but also a product of his atmosphere as well. It's a unique film. Orson Welles, I think was so far ahead of his time that I don't think the movie world, especially Hollywood, knew what to do with him. You know what I mean? They wouldn't let him make the movies that he wanted to make. They wouldn't let him do what he wanted to do, and he struggled throughout his entire career just to have a career, really. He said that the worst thing he ever did was become a filmmaker. You know what I mean? Because he loved movies, but movies never loved him back. I don't know if that's a direct quote, but it kind of feels like it. But he became more beloved as his life went on, and I think he's more beloved now than he was when he was alive, sadly. But I could go on forever about Orson Welles, so I won't. But yeah, just in case my number one.
Purposefully did not pick an Orson Welles because I knew you would be. Obviously, this is somebody that deserves all of the respect that he's been given and more. Citizen Kane is one of those that a lot of people that are seeing it for the first time, they've lived up to this massive reputation of being on the top of the AFI 100 list for decades and all that this must be the perfect film, and a lot of them watch it and they're a little let down. And it seems like they're looking at this, revered whole piece. I really think people that are watching this for the first time nowadays really need to break this down into certain shots, because there are certain shot perspectives that Welles takes in this film that, when put in context of the time when this was made, had literally never existed. It is crazy what he was able to accomplish with this. Some of the stories of the making of, with him doing angles of the camera work that had never been done before, and people are like, what in the hell are you doing? Yeah. And it ends up as this magnificent piece that it's so hard to argue with.
Yeah, the set design in this film, the whole aesthetic of it is so incredibly haunting. And I feel like he did that a lot throughout his films. If you see any of his Shakespeare adaptations, whether it be Othello or Macbeth or stuff like that, the films are so artistic and so ahead of their time. There's stuff that you would see in art house cinemas today, but at the time really weren't a thing. Just incredibly haunting work, I think. And like you're saying, just breaking all of the rules at the time, even though there really weren't any rules, but people assumed that there were. And I think that's kind of why he wasn't as loved as he probably should have been, because they didn't know how to deal with what he was doing because it was so unique of his time.
And
Um,
honestly, I think that we're kind of facing that still. I think he was so far ahead of time. A lot of us probably are still not even reaching that point yet. Like it's like he was setting expectations that even in 2023 we can't reach some of those spots because it was so revolutionary that we're just scrambling to try to come up with something that is even remotely worthy next to that.
very true. Very true.
For Wells, I might put Touch of Evil ahead of it for me.
I don't
I think
disagree with you.
I think Kane is great. I will never say it's not, but Touch of Evil might be my favorite Wells. Any honorable mentions that you were considering? Not for Wells specifically, but other actors
Oh,
turned
yeah, I was
directors.
actually just going to mention that. So there are a lot of I would say honorable mentions. I won't go through all of them, but Good Night and Good Luck. You know, George Clooney, I think, started out his career very strong
Yeah,
with Good Night and Good Luck and Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. I think his career is a little dissipated over the last few years with things like
yeah,
Suburbicon and Monuments Men. What's interesting is that early on in his career, you could tell his influences were from directors he had just worked with.
yeah,
Um, Soderbergh definitely for his early stuff, the Coens for his later stuff. And the Coens are so specific that you can't quite emulate them, even if you
yeah.
try. I also have Reds, the film done by Warren Beatty.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, that was on Unforgiven, Clint Eastwood. He's kind of the most notorious actor turned director because he's done so much of both.
Yeah.
The General, Buster Keaton. Talk about action films. Talk about films setting precedents and doing things that had never been done before. The General, definitely. But Gone Baby Gone, Ben Affleck's first film.
Ah,
Talk about premieres. Of course, I think his career once again, like Clooney, started off very hot, very hot. Ordinary People, Robert Redford. Um, Braveheart, which was Mel Gibson in the '90s, doing his thing. Garden State is I think has a soft
ah,
spot in my heart. The Zach Braff film, which is very much of its time, but also timeless.
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just a romantic at heart. I like romance stories. That Thing You Do, Tom Hanks,
Ah, love that movie.
kind of underrated, needs a Blu-ray re-release because that Blu-ray does not look particularly great.
Right.
I know we're coming up on an anniversary, I think in 2 years. I think it came out in 95, 96.
Really?
So maybe 2, 3 years.
Huh.
Um,
Okay.
and then The Hitchhiker, Ida Lupino.
Oh
Uh,
God. Yeah.
yeah, great film. Ida Lupino, great director, making unique. Talk about cultural significant films in the '50s and '60s. Very much making women's pictures, but that's not a negative. She was making films about women dealing with problems of women of the time. Very good films. Very, and I think The Hitchhiker, while not being one of those films, is definitely one that's I think a staple of the I would say horror genre.
Right.
I would say. I mean, they made The Hitcher in the '80s with Rutger Hauer, which is definitely a take on this.
Yeah. Ida Lupino, absolutely. First off, it's a crime that she was for a while, and people that don't have never studied on the sort of thing, like she was not allowed to direct movies, which is just this crazy aspect of life.
She had to
Uh,
fight. Yeah.
all right, some of mine real quick. I'm going to keep a lot of mine modern, but I do have some classics I'm going to throw out there. Booksmart by Olivia Wilde, I think, is probably the best female-centric, like overnight buddy comedy that we've ever had. I think it's incredible. Um, Jordan Peele. So obviously, Jordan Peele has acted in a lot of stuff, and everybody's first thought is to go to Get Out. For me, looking back now, and even after having watched Nope a few times and the others a couple times, Us is his masterpiece to me.
Thank you.
I love Us. Um, I appreciate what he did in Get Out, but Us is this captivating, artistically defining story that I can't help but be mystified with every time.
I go back to Us a lot more, and in terms of thinking about his films, Us is one that really sticks with me because of how haunting it is and what he's trying to say and things like that in it. Um, Yeah, I totally agree.
Well, and it's visually striking in a way that Nope and Get Out really couldn't be, and they didn't need to be because the story didn't call for it. But with Us, it was a visually defining movie, so it was something that needed this stylistic choice that the others just couldn't give you, and I just adore it. It
I
is so well made.
I felt like it was him trying to take a further step forward from what he had established in Get Out, this kind
Right,
of Twilight Zone-esque type of situation, but he tried to take it one step further, both stylistically and thematically. Like he tried to expand it out even more. And I
right.
super props to him for attempting to do that.
So I've got three left. One is you mentioned Mel Gibson again, problematic. We all know that.
Yeah.
However, Apocalypto is a masterpiece. This movie should not have existed the way it does. It is beautiful. It is breathtaking. I want to watch Apocalypto tonight now. The next one, a lot of people again don't really harp on this, not realizing that he directed these. Ben Stiller directing Tropic Thunder and The Cable Guy. I think Tropic Thunder is his masterpiece, but so few people pay attention to The Cable Guy. Jim Carrey in a almost terrifying stalker role with a cast that is mind-blowing, even for when it was made. Janine Garofalo, we've got Ben Stiller in a small part. Jim Carrey absolutely killing every single scene that he's in.
I believe Jack Black plays the brother.
Yep.
Yeah, plays um, Matthew Broderick's brother in that film. Yeah.
Yeah, all leading up to Matthew Broderick in this just kind of straight man victim role, and it's such like this all-encompassing movie of dread and awkwardness, and it's just wonderfully
But
directed. Ben,
yeah, and underneath it all is kind of this thematic commentary on the harmful, the harmfulness of just neglectful parenting
yeah,
and just being inundated with media consumption. Because the whole premise is like Jim Carrey's character is kind of insane because all he did was watch television as a
right.
child, and he had no real social interaction with any type of parental structure. And it's kind of commenting on that, which is if you think about it now, we've just got more of that than ever before. I mean, how many different things can you watch right now? You know what I mean? There's endless streaming amounts of stuff you can stream, movies, TV, all this kind of stuff. So it's commenting on that.
Not to get meta about it, but even so much that the theme for tonight is fulfilled within The Cable Guy because Jim Carrey watches Play Misty for Me, which in my opinion is the best Clint Eastwood directed film.
Yeah, it's damn good.
Uh,
I was gonna say the Kino release is also very very good. That remaster one they put out a couple of years ago, it's very very good release.
yeah, the themes behind this are so relevant now and forever. The last one for me, this is one that I kind of wanted to say for last because it's not really one of my favorites because you really have to be in a mood for any of his films, primarily because they're known for being so shouty. John Cassavetes is kind of this amazing auteur that deserves so much more respect that he gets, so much more respect than he gets even today. I mean, Gloria just got re-released by Kino. Love Streams is incredible. The Killing of a Chinese Bookie, A Woman Under the Influence. I could name probably 6 more
Yeah,
films that would fit this, but again, it's not really one of my 5 favorites, but it's one that he needs that much more respect because he was incredible as a director and really damn good as an actor still.
yeah. Get that for those of you who don't know Cassavetes, the best way to start that Criterion box set, the Blu-ray box set.
Yep.
It'll give you all of his essential films. It'll give you just stuff on his work and all that kind of stuff. Talk about somebody who broke all the rules and then created his own. If you watch a Cassavetes film, there's nothing like it. He would just hand the camera to people, random people, to shoot scenes sometimes,
Yep.
and that's why it's all over the place. It's unnatural in every aspect, but it's brilliant, unbelievably brilliant. Yeah, his work, Shadows, Faces, Opening Night, um, yeah, Love Streams. It just yeah, so much of his work is so good. Um, yeah, I got to get more of his stuff to add to the collection because more of it has come out. Like Too Late Blues, I think is another one of his films. That's got a Blu-ray release from years ago that I've got to get my hands on. But yeah, Cassavetes was brilliant. I completely forgot that he both acted and directed. Don't ask me why. He was in Oh, he was in. I can't remember the film that he was in now. Oh, he was in Rosemary's Baby, coincidentally, that we
Correct.
talked
Yeah.
about earlier.
Yeah, he was gosh, he was in was it Incubus, I think, which is the Vinegar Syndrome release that a lot of people loved. I love that movie. I think he was in that one as well.
Yeah, he was
Um
also in The Dirty Dozen.
mm,
That's the movie I just couldn't think of. Yeah, he was in The Dirty Dozen as one of the soldiers.
right. Yeah. Obviously there's a lot of choices that we could have had tonight. There's lots of honorable mentions that we could have said. I mean, even Video Store just brought up Ron Howard, which obviously he was an actor turned director, considering he acted so young, but he's made multiple
Yeah.
masterpieces.
I love Apollo. Apollo 13 is probably one of my favorite like movies that I could just have on because I've seen it so many times.
Yeah.
A Beautiful Mind is also fantastic.
Good stuff. Man, this has been a fun topic. Looking on, some of these people that are so incredibly talented, and then switch to something that it is really easy to think that you can be a good director and not necessarily pull it off. And God, there were some really, really great choices tonight.
Agreed.
I appreciate you. This has been fun.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. It's a long trek. I don't know how you do it every week. I know I couldn't do it every week. I mean, it's tiring. It's tiring.
It is. I appreciate you doing it. Not a lot of people can just volunteer for a 3.5-hour show. So
Yeah.
everybody, again, go listen to Chasing Labels.
Yes.
And subscribe to their YouTube, their podcast, everything else they possibly can. As I said earlier in the show, if you are interested in getting the Physical Media Advocate zine, go ahead and send me an email afterwards. That link is in the description below. If you'd rather get it through the Patreon, that link is down there below as well. Good luck, everything in the near future. Lots of interviews coming from Chasing Labels. Anything else for you?
No, me personally, no. Everything's movie related. From the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep, it's all movies all the time, and then
Same.
TV shows and comic books and books too. It's all those things. But yeah, those of you who want to follow and subscribe and all that stuff, we're available on all of the major places where you can find podcasts, Apple Podcasts, like Google and stuff. Steven handles all of this. That's why I'm never good at it.
Spotify's the other big one.
Spotify's the other one. I know Stitcher's going away, but I think we're on Google Play and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, we find us also our YouTube channel, Chasing Labels, which there's a bunch of old movie reviews I used to do on there. Plus, there's a bunch of our interviews that we started posting up there this year as well. So it's been, like I said, it's been a whirlwind of a year, and it's only July. So we still have a whole half a year left of movie releases and all kinds of stuff.
And it's the busy time. I mean, we're starting to get September and October releases, and October and November are arguably the biggest months of the year. So it's about to get kind of crazy around here.
Yeah, it's gonna be a wild end of the year, I think, because we've got a lot of big heavy hitters in terms of releases so far, but I feel like you're saying, there's more to come.
Well, not to try to hype up this next week too much, but everybody should keep in mind we have Arrow announcements tomorrow morning, which they've leaked, so most people know those already.
Yes.
You've got OCN announcements, including Vinegar Syndrome, on Tuesday. You've got TerrorVision announcements on Tuesday, which are being hyped up for months now, and it sounds like there's about to be something massive coming out of that camp. Culture Shock just revealed in this stream that we're going to find out who's distributing them next week. We've got Shout Factory is probably going to do their announcements next week. It's starting, everybody.
Yeah, it's a whole new month, so that means everybody comes to play. Everybody that we all just talked about, and then so much more.
All that being said, I appreciate you guys. Thank you for hanging out. This has been an incredible show tonight. Love this topic. And from two collectors to all of you, have a good night. Stay safe. We'll see you next Thursday.